shall we get this show on the road, sir?
Yeah, go for it, man.
I should do something smart and witty, like, Road 2 flight controllers, listen up, give me a go, no go for launch. But there's only two of us.
Yeah, no,
so it'll be a very short one. So from that, I will segue seamlessly into an introduction. Say hello, everyone, and welcome to the what are we calling this? From the Earth to the Moon podcast?
Yeah, I suppose.
It's a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it? We did actually miss a trick. You know what we could have called it?
Go on. Well, you still can.
Well, we could call it Rogue to the Moon.
Ooh,
you see what I did there?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm stretching it a bit there.
Yeah. Would you like some cheese with that?
A little, yes. We'll put a pin in that and maybe circle around on a trans-lunar trajectory, perhaps. Hey.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Yeah. You
so
see
we have
what I
a
did?
big blackboard with an X on it.
Yes.
And we're at this point, we could turn around here. Or we could use the moon to come back.
Yes. Because, if we, we're dragging this out a little bit, certainly for an introduction. So let's say hello and welcome to what is currently called the From the Earth to the Moon podcast. That might change. It might not. We haven't decided yet. I'm Andy. And this is Elton.
Yeah, it's me.
It's Elton. Yeah, I'm driving this one. Yeah, you motherfuckers, you're doomed.
Yeah, this one's yours, man. This one's yours.
This is mine. So as some of you may know, last year, myself and Elton, we did Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers as a little review, because it's a nice little compact series, isn't it?
Certainly is. I love it, and I love it even more now. So
it was a fun journey, a little nostalgia trip. It stands up great. If you have any interest in just well-made programming or that era or anything, just go and watch it and listen to our podcast. Where can they find that, Elton? Let's plug it now.
Okay, you can find it over at rogue2media.com.
Yes, it was a fun little romp. It took us a little bit longer than we planned, but life and all that.
And one thing I love about it is it hasn't ruined the series for me as well. Sometimes when I did Lost, I had totally loved Lost until the last season, and then that kind of ruined it for me. So, yeah, there we go.
So we were thinking, what do we do now? We've finished the Second World War. I suggested we do From the Earth to the Moon, which is another HBO series. It's a 10-part series. Had you seen this before?
Do you know, I think I have seen bits of it. I hadn't seen it all. There are episodes I recognise bits from, but I couldn't turn around and say, yes, I've seen that series.
Well, you see, I suggested this partly because it's something I'd seen ages ago and really enjoyed it and have a nostalgia for, but also because I thought in this time, in 2017 and all that, it would be nice to watch something which was, science-y. It's about exploration. It's about a positive message. It's not about killing anyone. It's about everyone bringing science and knowledge and all that stuff together with a goal. The goal being to land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth.
It's an adventure, isn't it?
It is an adventure. And the great thing is it's a story which I think if someone wrote this from scratch, no one would believe it. We literally went from the first powered flight in 1903 to man standing on the moon in like 60 years.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it?
It's not bad going. It's been a bit stagnant since then, but
yeah.
That first 60 years was pretty fucking epic.
Yeah, the next 60, I can't see anything else really happening.
Let's try and stay positive. Let's try and stay positive.
Sorry.
Elon Musk is out there, and when he's not hocking flamethrowers to us all, he's aiming to get to Mars. So there is hope.
Can I just mention them flamethrowers? He wants to sell us flamethrowers for zombies, yes?
No, he's just selling us flamethrowers. He's just saying they might be useful in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Right,
okay. I don't think so. Because if you set a zombie on fire, you've just now got a flaming zombie.
And you don't mean flaming as in, a polite swear word. You mean literally a zombie is on fire and now coming towards you.
Yeah, so imagine this, a zombie coming towards you, and now set him on fire and he comes towards you. That's just scarier.
Yes, they haven't thought that through, if I'm honest. So, if you want a flamethrower, if you go over to the Boring Company website, you can order one for $500.
Jesus.
But anyway, let's get back to the old Apollo stuff. So, yes, we're going to do From the Earth to the Moon, but in the same way the Band of Brothers podcast, we started with Saving Private Ryan, which kind of kicked off the whole thing. We've decided we're going to kick off with Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Because we figure a lot more of you will have seen this, if nothing else. It also was kind of a springboard to the series, and it's just a damn good film.
Yeah, and it's the Tom Hanks factor as well, isn't it? He seems to get his teeth into something, and then from that point, builds on it.
You definitely get the impression everyone involved in this project was all in. They were like, absolutely, we want to be a part of this. This is fantastic.
And this all came before Saving Private Ryan as well, didn't it?
Yeah, this was 1995, and Saving Private Ryan was 97?
Yeah.
So yes, a couple of years before. And having watched Apollo 13 again, much like Saving Private Ryan, it stands up fantastically well. It's just a delight. So yes, we are going to talk about Apollo 13 now. So there you go.
Good.
So my first question to you, Elton, is you've seen this before, correct?
Yes, I have. Yes, a number of times actually.
Good. My other question to you, though, is what is your relationship with the Apollo program and NASA in general? Because I know from Shonky Lab episodes that you have an affinity with space and things like that. So talk to me about Apollo. At least you and Apollo.
Okay, well, my love affair with Apollo, I don't know if I'd call that really, but I think it's more the space and the journey and the grandeur of actually blasting off in a massive rocket and heading towards the moon. I think that's what I love, and that really sprouted off when I was in junior school and just fell in love with all that sort of stuff. We had a library at the school and you could go through all the books, and I would always go through, there was a mystery book with a big skull on the front, and it had all like dragons and demons and vampires, and then you'd have the space section, and I'd either head for that book or the space section, and was just in awe of everything. I think it was around that time where it was still possible to dream about being an astronaut.
Oh, yes.
And it would always be put on someone's CV, or, oh, what would you like to be when you grow up? Oh, I'd like to be a vet. Oh, I'd like to be an astronaut. And kids wouldn't laugh at you about it. They didn't think that they'd ever get there, but it was still rock and roll to be an astronaut.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for myself, when I was certainly into the space and outdoor stuff, but it was the shuttle for me. Mm-hmm. The shuttle was what kind of appealed to me. And strangely, as I've gotten older, I've fallen out of love with the shuttle. It's an impressive vehicle, but it's a space pickup. It's a truck that's designed to just go into orbit, drop off cargo, and come back. And it was really kind of a bastardized child, that the US Air Force wanted to do this, and NASA wanted to do that, and everyone else wanted to do this. But with Apollo and the Saturn V and all that, that was there just to go to the moon.
Yeah.
That was all it was created for. I mean, they tried to repurpose it at the end, but it was solely to explore. And I mean, it was really Apollo 13 which really got me into the Apollo program and stuff like that. Prior to that, I was familiar with Apollo 11, obviously, and Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. But I didn't really know much about the rest of the program. And it was Apollo 13 which kind of opened my eyes to the rest of it. Mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say, still a huge fan of Apollo. I have the big Lego Saturn V on my shelf. It's very cool.
Yeah, curse you for getting that.
Shakes fist.
The one thing I do really love, I think it is the rocket that really gets you going about this sort of thing. And it's just the waste of material that we use to get anywhere near the moon or up into orbit, really. You have the first, second, third stage, I suppose.
Well, you've got the first stage, the S1C, which is 5 F1 engines, and we'll get into some of this stuff a bit later on, certainly throughout the series. But that and then the S2 stage are there just to get the S4B stage into Earth orbit.
Yeah.
That then burns to launch the rest of it on the trans-lunar injection, which is to get towards the moon. And then that detaches, and then it's the command service module and the lunar module which detach. It was described, it's a 12-story building, leaves the launch pad, and all it comes back is something the size of a VW Bug.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say that size. Yeah, I suppose that size, yeah.
Yeah, it's
bonkers though, isn't it?
It's absolutely insane. But it's also insane when you just look at the technology they use to do it. You know, it's flick switches and all this sort of stuff. It's like you have a hard time believing. You know, people make the joke about how there's more computing power in your phone than in the entire Apollo spacecraft. It's absolutely true. But it still worked, you know, and they managed to get it to work, and they got it to work relatively quickly too.
Yeah, but I wouldn't trade anything. I wouldn't trade any touch screens. I wouldn't trade them off for a big panel of buttons that you can press, and then when you press that button, a light glows behind it. I think that is just superb.
Oh, the aesthetics of it are great. There's something about that it's flick switches where you got to flick up the lever and then press the button.
Yeah,
like
they're the best, aren't they?
They are. It's like, and they got yellow and black hatch marks because they're warning, because stuff will happen with it. That's just all fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh,
man.
So yeah, there you go. We're both big fans of the Apollo program and of this film. So I'll tell you what. Let's start off. Let's just a little bit of housekeeping. Just to tell people who may not know anything about this. This is the film Apollo 13 from 1995. It's directed by Ron Howard. Yes, Richie Cunningham directed this film.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on the book Lost Moon by Jim Lovell, the actual astronaut commander. And it stars Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, Gary Sinise, Ed Harris, and Kathleen Quinlan. And the music's by James Horner. One of his best scores, I think, as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
It's one of those scores where when people say to you James Horner, people think Aliens or Titanic or Wrath of Khan or something like that. But this, just when we were watching this again, it's so evocative. It's beautiful.
It is, but it's also one of them ones where I know a lot of people say if you don't notice the music, then it's doing its job and it's just dragging you along for the ride. And I feel that it does that in a lot of the places as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, absolutely. But I think what's interesting is things like when we have a problem moment, because there's actual NASA footage and audio recordings of that whole bit.
Yeah.
The audio logs from when they're saying, Houston, we've had a problem, and they're going through the checklists and all that sort of stuff. And you listen to it and it's very calm, very dry. You don't really get a sense of the danger and the tension there. Whereas when you're watching it in the film, it gets your heart going.
Mm.
It really does feel tense. And I think that's a testament to how good, like you said, you're not there listening to the music and it's not overwhelming the scene, but it's adding so much. And it's very rare that you get a chance to actually see that and how that all connects and works there.
Yeah, definitely.
So that all works. I guess the other thing just to mention, in case you're listening to this having not seen the film or never heard about Apollo 13, in which case, go watch the film because it's a really good film. We're going to spoil it, but it is a real event that happened like 40, nearly 50 years ago at this point. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's where it becomes real life. You can't kind of spoil that, can you? So
exactly. So, spoiler alert: they do get back at the end.
But I would, because there are going to be people that haven't seen this before, and possibly people that are just diving into this and are not aware that it's a real life event.
This is an extremely accurate film. I mean, one of the things I certainly gripe against is when you're watching films based on historical facts and they feel the need to embellish details and change stuff for apparently no reason. And this does have some apocryphal moments. They've condensed some characters down into one person for the sake of ease. They've added a little bit of drama in places they might not need to. But other than that, this is extremely accurate. They worked very closely with NASA to make the most authentic story as they could do, because the story itself has enough drama in it.
Yeah.
It didn't need any embellishments. I mean, if you look at something like Dunkirk, it's a very impressive visual spectacle of a film, but they made some changes which, to me, don't make a huge amount of sense and actually detract from the real story.
Yeah.
So, but that's for a future cast there. Anyway,
just wondering who had more access to the NASA stuff. Would it have been this movie, or would it have been Armageddon? Because I know Michael Bay had a lot of access by NASA, didn't he?
Michael Bay had a lot of access and support, but I think that was more, he would say, we want to do this, and they'd say, yeah, sure, whatever. Mm-hmm. This, NASA would be saying, oh, you should do this, or we would have done this. They would have had a lot more input, I would have thought.
Right.
Especially because Jim Lovell, who wrote the book, was, again, involved in the process here. So I think NASA had a lot more active input in this film than with, say, Armageddon. I mean, I'll tell you what, the only film I think which might have had the same level of input and access would have been The Martian.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think in both instances, NASA probably saw it as a good PR tool for them. Which, fair enough, fair play to them.
Yeah, and because it is the future, really, isn't it? That's what they're aiming for, and that's what they're hoping to project onto the younger generation. Yeah,
and both show NASA in a very positive light, whereas I think in Armageddon, it's they don't maybe come over quite as well as
no, or Apollo 18,
which we agreed we would not mention.
Oh, did we? Oh,
we did agree that. We're one episode in, and you've already screwed that up.
Sorry, boss.
I'll tell you what, out there, if you do want us to do Apollo 18, Elton does have a Patreon. Get enough money on there, and we'll do Apollo 18.
Oh, but give over, man.
It's not being done voluntarily otherwise. Okay, so let's get on with Saturn V, shall we? So the start of the film, and we're not going to go blow by blow on this. We're just going to touch on bits and particular sequences and stuff which we feel are important. And obviously, jump in when you want here, Elton.
Yeah.
But the film starts with Walter Cronkite, who was a CBS newscaster on the Apollo 11 landings. He recorded new dialogue for this, talking about the Apollo 1 fire.
Oh, man.
I never knew about the Apollo 1 fire before Apollo 13. Did you?
Oh, I was aware of it. Yeah, I was aware of it before seeing this movie, definitely. But I think that comes from just reading the books and looking at the pretty pictures, and then you go through a book from the first flight made by man to the space shuttle, and you go through all these things, and you go through all the dramas that they had, and at the very end you'd have the space shuttle Challenger disaster, but then you'd also have in the middle this kind of section. What Apollo was it that this happened on?
This was Apollo 1.
Apollo 1.
Well, okay, because very briefly, and we'll get into this in more detail when we get to the Apollo 1 episode. But it was the mission they were going to launch on would have been declared Apollo 1. But when they were actually killed, it was before they'd done that designation. So it was, in effect, posthumously named Apollo 1.
That's right, yeah, because was it the Gemini?
No, it wasn't Apollo. It was the first Apollo mission. First Apollo capsule.
Right, okay. And they decided to call it the Apollo. Right. Okay.
It was Project Apollo, but with the capsule, they were doing a ground test, effectively. I don't think it was a static fire. It was a pressurization test, I think. And again, we'll get into this in a lot more detail in the actual episode. Mm-hmm. But they overpressurized with oxygen. There was a spark, and the whole thing went up. And what happened was they just couldn't get out. The hatchway was designed that you, in effect, needed someone outside to open a panel to then open the inner hatch. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't do it. They just couldn't get enough torque on it to open it themselves. And Gunter Wendt, the character of Gunter Wendt, was an actual person who, on the, I believe, Mercury and the Gemini missions, was employed by, I think, Rockwell, who made those capsules.
Yeah. And
he oversaw the final, the crew getting in there. He was the pad team leader, basically. And he signed off when he was happy with everything, and it went. Now, because Rockwell didn't build the Apollo capsules, he wasn't there for that, and the astronauts weren't happy. After Apollo 1, NASA approached him, and I think they hired him directly, and then he oversaw all of the Apollo launches after that because of the fire.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but it's a really powerful way to start the film, I think.
Well, yeah, you got a lot of music there. You got a lot of slow motion there. People slow walking towards their destiny as well, don't you? And yeah, it's just powerful from start to finish, really, isn't it?
That narration as well from Walter Cronkite, which, again, a lot of people will recognise from the, Armstrong is on the moon.
Yeah.
Incidentally, did it depress you when he goes, a 38-year-old American standing on the surface of the moon? Because it depressed the fuck out of me.
Oh, it's disgusting, isn't it? It really is.
I'm like, okay, I've got like 2 years now to get myself to the surface of the moon. Shit.
Oh, I should have done it by now. It's really bad. It's like, oh, man. It's like when you find footballers or your sporting heroes, they retire because they're old, but they're younger than you. And you're like, oh, God.
Oh, it's like Formula One drivers. Pascal Wehrlein's washed up at like 22.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Still, there's still time. There's still time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the whole beginning of this it's a very great way, because if you imagine if someone had never heard of Apollo 11 or anything like that, it very concisely tells you everything you need to know to set up what's going on here. Mm-hmm. He says about President Kennedy's, goal to get on the moon before the end of the decade. It tells you about the dangers of the fire. It tells you that this is the Apollo 11 landing. And, it does all that really well while introducing us to, Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Ken Manningly. And Jack Schweigert, who is at the party as well, chatting up a girl. Kind of creepy, like.
Oh, with the docking and the glass and the beer bottle. Yeah, that's class. That really is class. But what I do like about this is the film really is structured about the human race and the way that it's their journey to get where they want to go. And you start off with the dangers of the space flight, and then humans, idiots they are, it just becomes blasé, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, and you definitely you can see up until the point of the problem that okay, we've won, we're not interested anymore.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like it was so short-sighted. We've beaten the Russians. Why bother going back? And again, I mean, in effect, that's what happened. We did get 6 missions to the moon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Apollo 17 was the last one, and 13 didn't land. But yeah, that was it. And then 73, 74, we've not been back since. Mm-hmm. Because, again, we beat the Russians, who cares? Got better things to spend our money on. And that's kind of depressing. And it has taken us a good... well, again, we're not back yet. And the space shuttle, as I said before, was a huge misstep because it was a hugely expensive space truck. It just wasn't suitable for exploration, which is a shame.
Which, yeah, it narrows our horizon, doesn't it? It's good for orbit and ferrying stuff from the space station from Earth and backwards and forwards, but it's not designed to go any further than that. And so, once again, the human race is limited into how far they can reach. Yeah. And since that they've already reached the moon, then... Well, why do we want to go back there? There's nothing out there, really, is there?
I know. It is a shame. And again, as they say at the end, I can't wait until we go back. But yeah, the opening of this film, I think it's a great way to introduce the program and the characters. Mm-hmm. It just very concisely does it. And almost straight away, after that, we're into the action. We're down at the vehicle assembly building, seeing the Saturn V put together. Some great CG as well.
Oh, that shot where they're on the walkway and it just pans over the top.
Yeah.
Oh, it was at the very beginning of real good CGI as well, wasn't it?
Well, I think here again we have it's not just CGI. I think it's models with CG enhancements.
Right. I was always led to believe it was just purely CGI, but
it might be, and we'd have to check. But I think it was a model And then there was other stuff done on the top of that. And I'm only really saying that because of how well it stands up. Because I can't think of any other CG, pure CG from that period where you don't look at it now and just cringe. And I mean, especially like stuff on the Earth, stuff that's, and I'm finger quoting here, real. I mean, if it's a spaceship, out in space and stuff like that, fine, you can kind of get away with it. But you look at, I mean, even Star Wars in The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and this is Lucasfilm with, ILM's unlimited budgets there. That CG is really bad now. The model stuff still stands up great, but the CG...
It's not great, is it?
It is not. So I do think this was models with CG stuff onto it. But it's just great seeing, the scale and the grandeur of that building and everything. And the really interesting thing again is NASA's going back to those sort of rockets with the SLS.
Yep.
And again, they're going to build it there, and it's going to be the same sort of thing again. And that's just going to be so cool. I'm really hoping I get to go and see that launch as well.
Have you ever been to that building?
I've never been to Florida. Oh, I have been to Florida, but not to that bit of Florida. But yes.
Right. So okay, so you've been to Florida, but not there. That surprises me.
I was working, and so I couldn't just run off to do that. and it's the only space shuttle I've still got to see is in Florida, because I've seen Enterprise, Discovery, and Endeavour. But Atlantis is in Kennedy Space Center.
Ah, okay.
They also have a Saturn V there. I really want to go and see a Saturn V.
Laid on its side, though, isn't it?
It's laid on its side. It's now inside a large building, broken down into the stages.
Oh, okay.
And it just looks really, really cool.
Oh, man.
But there you go. There's another thing for the Patreon. If you want to sponsor us, we'll both go to the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, there you go.
For you, the listeners.
Yeah, pop along to patreon.com/Rogue2Media, and you can drop some shekels over there.
Yes, chuck in a buck to steal from another podcast. So anyway, again, this is very good, concise storytelling. I think within like 20 minutes, we've introduced all the characters. Boom, we're going to the moon. It's great. That's all I need.
Yeah, well, the build-up of the characters, I do love the character of Lovell, because when they're going through all their sequences and they're practicing and they're practicing and they're practicing, and there's a bit where they all come out the simulator and they have their another three guys going back into the simulator, and they're like, well, that's right, yeah. Well, we didn't quite get it right, did we? We can always make it better, and so they swap over again. And they jump back in there, and I love
that. Wasn't Lovell though, was it? That was Mattingly.
Oh, okay, yes. But there's no questions about it. It's we need to get it right. We need to get it right. So let's do the practice that we can. We're on Earth now. Might as well do it now.
Oh yes, we don't want problems later on.
No,
that would be terrible if we had a problem.
Oh, as if we would have like a dream sequence with something going wrong.
That whole dream sequence. Again, the very first time I watched this film, I remember thinking there was something wrong with I think it was a VHS tape or something. But have I missed a bit? Is there a problem here? Because all of a sudden we were in space. It's like, what happened here?
But yeah, okay, yeah. So we're very close to like launching as well now, because that's what we're building up to, really, isn't it?
Well, it is all building up to that first set piece for launch. I mean, again, we have a couple of nice moments with his family. We kind of see the dynamics working there. He's got a teenage daughter, obsessed with the Beatles, and he's got a young kid. And again, Ron Howard's very good at imparting information without making it seem like he's just sitting there imparting information, of the kid asking about the fire and the hatch and problems going wrong, and it just kind of gives this sense of yes, they're going into space, yes, it's Apollo 13, we've had 2 more since, but it does feel like there can be problems. It's a little bit of foreshadowing there,
yeah,
but not overly heavily handed, and it's just a really nice little scene and a sequence there. We can also see how well bonded the team are. So you've got Lovell, Hayes, and Mattingly. And, again, they're working together. Like you said, in the simulator, they're just click, 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 getting on really well. They've got that nice bit as well when they're having a picture taken. And someone asked them, so how do you feel about launching on Apollo 13, taking off at 13 hours, and entering the moon's gravity on April 13th? And then you go about, oh, well, we did some tests. We're having a black cat walk underneath a ladder. You do almost feel like someone was like tempting fate a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to know how accurate all that sort of stuff is. I know the times are fairly accurate, aren't they? But
the times are accurate. And yeah, basically it was because on that date that they launched, which I think was April 11th, I think it was, the best time to launch was at 13:13. That was the best window.
Yeah.
Or that's when the best window opened. And they'll always try and launch as soon as the window opens. And if they hadn't launched there the next day, it might have been a bit earlier or a bit later. Yeah. But yeah, it was based purely on the maths. You know, this is when the moon is going to be in the right place compared to where the Earth is and everything.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine that if that's not the most accurate and the best way to launch one of these rockets, then I don't think NASA would turn around and say, well, you know, it's got a 13 in it and there's too many 13s here. I don't think they'd be thinking like that. It would be in the back of their mind, but it wouldn't be the major problem to solve at that time.
Well, I imagine it's, you know, again, it was scoffing. God, silly. It's only scared of 13. I mean, it's a bit like how in Formula One, there's no car 13. Although now you can choose your own number. Maybe you could have a car 13, but yeah.
Maldonado. Anyway, let's get off that.
That's another podcast. So yeah, we're kind of building up to the launch, but before we get there, we get a bit with the crawler taking the Saturn to the launch pad. Incidentally, that was an actual crawler. Like
Really?
They went down to NASA and they let them use the crawler to film that shot.
Oh,
and that's the kind of access they got there, which is awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, it goes at walking pace or less than walking pace, isn't it? Like
Less than
1
walking
or 2,
pace.
2 miles an hour.
It's very slow. It's about walking pace, and I believe Ron Howard got to drive it.
Right. So there's a steering wheel on this thing. It doesn't just go backwards and forwards from a pad to a building.
Have you had a look at the Kennedy Space Center on Google Earth?
It's been such a long time since I've ever done that.
I'll find a picture for you later, but no, the pad, because there's 2 pads they used to launch from. There was 39A and 39B. Incidentally, SpaceX now launched from 39A.
Yes, yeah.
But basically, no, they're not a straight line. They're actually a turn. So now, hopefully, I'm going to send you this, and for all you listeners at home, this is riveting audio for you. But hopefully, this works for you, and you should see the vehicle assembly building near the bottom there, and it's a straight road, and then it splits into 2, one going to pad A, one going to pad B. But that's a hairpin. You know, that's an apex you've got to hit there if you want to.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a mighty long journey as well, isn't it?
It is, and there's a bit of a kink on that straight there, you know.
There is. What happened? Did they not listen to the Romans?
I think, given that there's a lake there called Gator Hole next to it, the geography might have had something to do with it.
Right, okay. That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, anyone who wants to do that, if you just go into Google and search for Kennedy Space Center, you can find it. You can even search for Launchpad 39, but you can kind of see how it is. But yeah, there's turns and stuff they have to go around here. Plus, once they got to the pads proper themselves, they had to drive up a ramp to get onto there.
Yes, yeah.
It's
just one of them huge machines where you think, no, that's just designed to go in a straight line, isn't it? And it won't deviate from that.
Well, I'll tell you what as well. If you go to roughly where the road splits on the map, if you zoom in, you can actually see one of the crawlers there.
Oh, right. Okay, I've got to open it up. I have to look at that now.
The road is called Saturn Causeway. Because all of this was really built to support the Apollo mission. And again, when we get into the episodes on the Earth to the Moon, a lot of them are about the development of various bits. The Apollo, the mission, the Saturn rockets, the LEM, the thing. So we'll go into all that stuff in a lot more detail in future episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you go on that, you can see the crawler there.
I can see the crawler.
Yeah, that's one of 3. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's a beast, man.
Well, like I said, you can see it from a satellite picture there.
That is a beast. Why don't they keep making the Saturn V. I reckon if they carried on building it, it would be cheaper to build by now, wouldn't it?
Well, strangely enough, they're actually resurrecting the engines to using the SLS. So when the SLS first launches, it's going to use some of the shuttle solid rocket boosters on the side. However, the later ones, what they want to do, because there's a lot of problems with those. I won't get into them too much now. Just Google Challenger disaster. But anyway,
the O-rings, etc.
All that stuff. Again, we could do a whole podcast just about why the shuttle wasn't as great as it should have been for political reasons. But anyway, they want to use the F1 engine because it is still the largest, most efficient rocket engine ever devised. So a couple of years ago, they actually fired up one of the turbo pumps from an F1, and they're currently looking to remanufacture these F1 engines. So with a little luck, those F1 engines will be flying again, which is going to be awesome.
Now, do you reckon the development of them has been it's been scuppered because we stopped going to the moon?
Well, it was partly that. I mean, again, going to the moon was very, very expensive. And, the Americans had little things like the Vietnam War they wanted to go and do,
That's right, yeah.
All that good shit. They love giving tax breaks as well. So, they wanted to get on doing that. But what happens when they stopped that and then moved over to the shuttle, they effectively went away from what was the best way to get into space, which is really the rockets and the return capsules. The Russians kept on developing it, which is why the Soyuz and the Proton rockets and all that, which are fundamentally of the same lineage as the Saturn V, like the same vintage, but they've been developed and refined and everything like that, flying for years and years now. Americans had the shuttle, which was supposedly reusable, but it was very expensive. It took a long time to refurbish. And again, it led to the destruction of both Challenger and Columbia.
Yeah.
When they came to replacing it, they're replacing it with what looks a lot like an Apollo command module, the Orion. And again, if you look at pictures of that, it just looks like a larger version of the Apollo. So effectively, development took a 30-year hiatus while we did this whole shuttle thing. And it's only now we're kind of getting back to where we were in the late 70s.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Although I do love the Soyuz. I love that design.
Yeah.
It just looks beefcake, doesn't it?
Well, I love all the thermal blankets. If anyone wants to see a good film featuring the Soyuz, check out Gravity, because it features quite heavily in that. And again, you get the sense on the inside of the Soyuz, it's very much like what the Apollo command module was like. And so you have to question, if Apollo had continued, what would that look like on the interior now? Probably very similar. So it's a shame, but it's the realities. It's a guy called Sidney Cam once said all aircraft have 4 dimensions: length, width, span, and politics. I think all 4 right if you're going to survive.
Yeah,
so,
So there was a change to the personnel.
So
wasn't there?
So what happened was one of the backup crew was exposed to the measles, or caught the measles, the German measles, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it and again, just people out there listening, this is before vaccinations were a thing. And it turns out that Ken Mattingly had not had the measles, so he had no immunity to it. And they were concerned that if he'd been exposed to it, he would start getting ill as they were entering lunar orbit, because it takes a little while for them to do. And, he's going to be on his own in the command module, with something that can kill you. If you're an adult and you get the measles, that can legitimately kill you.
Yes, definitely. And they didn't really know what would happen in 0G either.
Absolutely. So what they basically did was, they said, okay, he cannot fly because of this. And it's definitely conveyed that the surgeon is the bad guy here. And, he'll be fine. He'll walk it off. And, as it transpired, he didn't actually get the measles. But it was absolutely the right call to make at the time.
Yeah. Can I just ask? So,
yes.
Ken Mattingly, would he have been the command module? Would he have been the one left up in the
command module?
Yeah, command module. Or would he have been walking down onto the moon?
No, he would have been in the command module. So he was the command module pilot, Lovell was the commander, and Hayes was the LEM pilot.
Yeah. So you don't really want the guy who's left on his own to be catching the measles.
Well,
and
exactly.
having problems up there, do you?
Getting very, very ill on his own. No, that could be very bad.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know what it's like. When you go around a friend's house and they've been ill, and you walk into their house and you have that thing hit you in the face of the atmosphere from their house where they've just had all the windows shut, and the sickness and the illness, it just hits you full front in your face. And you think, oh, now imagine that in space.
Yes, that is not going to be fun at all.
You and your mate have been down on the moon, and then you pop up and you're like, oh, you're all right, mate? Oh, what is that smell?
I'd also be really concerned if he starts hallucinating, which you can do if you've got a fever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go outside for a walk.
Dude.
So yeah, I think they made the right call there. And I think it's worth noting as well, the only reason they were on this mission at all was because Al Shepard was bumped for medical reason. He had an ear infection. Mm-hmm. And because his ear infection flared up earlier into the program, they took the decision to bump his crew to Apollo 14.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think there was a huge amount of cause for Lovell to kick up too much of a stink about it, because the only reason they were going to be on Apollo 13 at all was because of a medical thing like that. And I think there's the scene they have where, you got Mattingly being told, and, he's obviously devastated but right before that, you had the bit with Schweigert being told he was going, and you got that massive elation to that's just a great jump cut.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much weight in that, though, isn't there? I love Kevin Bacon anyway, even though he does do horrible adverts nowadays. And just the way that he portrays that, where he gets the phone call, he's in the shower with a chick, and he's once again rock and roll, very rock and roll, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And he gets out of the shower and he takes a phone call, and it's just whoa,
woo. Incidentally, he says when he's going to get the phone, he goes, "Oh, I've got to get the phone because I'm on the backup crew, which means I've got to organise the party." Mm. And at the beginning, when they were having a party, because Lovell, Hayes, and Mattingly were the Apollo 11 backup crew.
Right. Okay.
So if there was a problem with Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin or Michael Collins that they couldn't have done Apollo 11, those would have been the first men on the moon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just fate, isn't it? It's the way that the chips fall.
A little bit. Again, it's just the way of it. So yeah, they have this thing, and again, it comes across and this is one of the bits of manufactured drama in the film. It is this sense of a lack of trust in Schweigert. Mm-hmm. This sense. I mean, a couple of times they refer to him as a rookie because saying as he's not been in space. I'm reasonably sure that Fred Hayes hadn't been in space either. It was. Jim Lovell was the most experienced astronaut at that time. He'd flown in a Gemini mission, and he'd been around the moon once on Apollo 8. But yeah, no, Fred Hayes, this was his first mission, and his only mission into space, actually. So, he was as well.
The license that they get, though, isn't it, to muck around with the script a little bit?
Oh, and again, I don't begrudge it because, again, I think, you probably need that little bit of drama there. That little bit of tension. So when things all do go wrong, you've got that bit of tension in there, mm-hmm. Because again, they have to condense, what was 4 days, I think, in total to 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's not even 2 hours. It's an hour 40. So, 140 minutes, however long that is. So you have to condense that down. 2 hours, 20 minutes to get that right. Sorry, doing maths.
That's
See,
right.
This is why I couldn't be an astronaut. I couldn't work this shit out in my head.
No, I couldn't do it either, no. But, yeah, I do like the tension that the film brings you.
Yeah.
But I feel that they would be, okay, well, if I'm sick, then, okay, fine, I'll step back. Yeah, they're not going to like it, but I think that it wouldn't be as dramatic as what it is portrayed in this movie.
You've got that moment as well when they're in the simulator and they burn up on re-entry because they do something to make it crash, what have you.
Yeah.
And then you have Deke Slayton calls Jim out, and he's like, "Are you going to be okay?" Implying that Schweigert isn't qualified or isn't ready. But you got to understand that Schweigert, as part of a backup crew, had been mirroring the training program throughout, because he was one of the ones going into the simulator in that earlier scene. And Schweigert actually helped write some of the procedures for the command module. He actually wrote some of the abort procedures if there was a problem on the thing. So he was an extremely qualified pilot. There would have been no question about his competence and his ability to do it. If there was, they wouldn't have put him in that position at all.
Yeah.
So, but again, I think it just helps convey, it's a very quick way to telegraph to the audience how you're supposed to feel about this this character.
That's right. Yeah. So, should we get into the actual launch itself? And
let's get onto the launch. One of my favourite scenes in the entire film, which is just fantastically well done. Although before we get to that, there's one bit. A lot of people think this is a made-up scene, but this actually happened. Marilyn Lovell lost her wedding ring the night of the launch, or the morning of the launch.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And a lot of people think that's her hokey kind of, that's laying on a little bit thick there, But no, that actually happened.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little things that you could class as hokey. There is a bit where he stalls his Corvette on the lights.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that was poetic license for this film. Whether he did that or not, I do not know. But it's, something went slightly wrong, out of his control a little bit. And you have the ring scene as well, which I think is a very, very good scene, actually.
I think Kathleen Quinlan, and again, we'll try and speak a little bit more about her and the family role, but she's fantastic. She actually got an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress for this film.
Oh, really?
But, because her and Tom Hanks went and lived with the Lovells for a while, really became friends with them and got to know them.
Dude, that'd be amazing.
So cool. But yeah, they've really got, the mannerisms down to the point where Marilyn Lovell said Tom Hanks had Jim Lovell's mannerisms down par excellence. He was spot on. that's just amazing, It's just so fucking cool.
Actors have the best job, don't they? They really do. They just go around to people's houses, live with them for a week, and then take the piss out of them. It's brilliant.
Oh, you say that. Others have to go and be in Michael Bay films, so it's not always great.
Yeah, that's true.
But let's get to the launch, because again, this bit's awesome.
Okay, what gets you going about this scene? Because it is just, I'm assuming there's a bit of model work in this as well.
Well, I suppose the scene kind of starts properly with them suiting up into the A7L spacesuits, which are just so cool. You've got this, they're getting all the patches for the bio vests put on, and you got that little joke of, Gunter Wendt, I want to wear Gunter Wendt.
And they get sandpapered on their chests as well.
Well, they're taking away chest hair so they get a clean contact with these things. But yeah, in effect, sandpaper.
Which I found bizarre.
A little bit, yeah. But I guess what's the alternative? A bit of a waxing paper?
Well, I would have thought that would have all been done before.
I guess. Well, it's got to be done fresh there anyway, because even if they did it the night before, they'd probably want to take back any stubble that's grown. So you may as well just get it done there.
And these are real men.
Real men, oh yes. Manly men.
That's right. These are real men, and their hair just grows straight away. It's like Homer when he has a shave.
Yes, it's true. There's a line in The Martian where Watney says, "Sometimes I wonder what would an Apollo astronaut do. What he'd do is he'd drink 3 whiskey sours, drive his Corvette to the launch pad, jump in top of a Saturn V into a command module smaller than my rover, and fly to the moon and back." Damn, what a guy.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, I love that bit, and again, you're seeing all the hardware coming together. You're seeing the Apollo, the Saturn V on its launch pad, it's sort of splendent. It's awesome. You got the cool bits as well with the photographers in what are in effect AA gun mounts with massive camera lenses on the side.
Yes.
Which are just the coolest thing ever. in the viewing platform, and that's all coming together. And all that was actually filmed, I believe, at the actual press area, because at that point it hadn't changed a huge amount from the Apollo era.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's changed since, and obviously, that. But the mission clock that they had there was the same one all the way through the shuttle launches as well. Right. And that's so cool. And we also get our first look into mission control, and Gene Kranz, played by Ed Harris.
Ah, yes, and he takes delivery of a waistcoat, doesn't he?
A very important item, yes. So it transpired that his wife would make him a waistcoat for every mission he was the flight controller on. And interestingly enough, his actual waistcoat is in the Smithsonian because of this film.
Really?
Well, this film made it popular and well known and everything like that. And because of that, people would ask, where is it, and wanted to see it and stuff like that. And so they put it on display. So you have an example here of a film kind of, influencing real life there, which is kind of interesting.
Something that would have just been thrown on the wayside or just left in a wardrobe somewhere hanging up and no real importance, but because the film zeroed in on it a little bit, then it becomes, oh, hang on, I want to see that. Absolutely.
I just think that's a very cool little thing there. But we get our first look at the flight controller's mission control. This isn't the actual mission control. They were to film there, but it turns out it's too small to get the cameras around them and everything. Whereas if it's a set, you can pull out walls if you need to and, tweak stuff as you need to do it.
Yep.
I can't really do that at the real one. But it was 100% accurate to the point where, Gene Kranz and other controllers would go there and, they say, at one point he went to leave the room, not Gene Kranz, but another controller went to leave the set, as it were, and he went to the doors where typically they would have gone out of, and it was a fake door.
Oh, man, that's brilliant.
Exactly. So, that's all really cool. I also love how you've got all the previous Apollo and Gemini and Mercury mission stamps up on the walls. Mm-hmm. And that's all really, really cool.
Yeah, I love that control room. I think it looks so glorious. I love even the colours of it as well. They're all pastels, aren't they?
It's all pastels and that kind of like electric green they had on the panels and stuff. Yeah. It's just, it has. And again, as we said before, it's all these big flicky switches and push buttons and stuff that all light up. And it's, I even like the microphones they've all got, like they've kind of, some of them are clipped onto the glasses and some of them are around their throats with the headset coming up.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it now, all the CRT TVs on there, and it's just old screen displays as well.
Oh, yeah. State of the art 1970, man.
And
awesome.
Wasn't Ron Howard's brother in this?
Yeah, he is the Clint Howard, I believe his name is.
He's the quintessential go-to science man, isn't he? If you want a sciencey looking kind of guy, then you go to him.
A little bit, yeah. So he is the Econ controller, which is electrical, environmental, and consumables manager. In fact, if you want, we'll geek it up a little bit. I have a list of all the flight controllers. So when he goes, Apollo 13 flight controllers, listen up, give me a go, no go for launch. Mm-hmm. And all of them, read them off. I have a list of who's who here, so I can tell you what they do.
Oh, okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the first one shouted out is Booster. Obviously, Booster is talking about the booster systems, effectively the rocket motors. So that's all of the stuff to do with the pre-launch and the Ascent. So the stage 1 and the stage 2 stuff, those big F1 engines on the Saturn V.
Yep.
Then there's Retro, and Retro is to do with the it's the abort plans and retro fire times and stuff like that. So, in effect, the smaller engines after the big ones are spent. So I think he also dealt with the S4B engine, which is the one for the translunar injection. So he does that. Then you have FIDO, who stands for, and says looking up thing on internet.
Flight Dynamics Officer.
Oh, is that the one?
I think it is, yeah.
No, that's F. Oh, yes, you're right. Flight Dynamics Officer, you are correct. I see it's there. Then there was Guidance. Guidance is the guidance systems, effectively, the computers. Surgeon is the surgeon, not a genius one there. Econ, which we've already mentioned, I think. Yes, he is the electrical, environmental, and consumables manager. So he's basically making sure there's electricity and oxygen, which is why when the accident happens, he has a lot of focus on doing the stuff there.
Yes, yeah, because all of his communications just go wonky, don't they?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Then we have GNC, which is Guidance, Navigational, and Control System, who is responsible for the onboard navigation and control systems and stuff like that. TeleMU, which is Telemetry, Electrical, EVA Mobility Unit Officer. So he is monitoring the Lunar module stuff.
Yep.
And all of that stuff. So it's effectively the equivalent of Ecom for the Lunar module. Control. What does Control do? Control Officer is responsible for the Lunar module's guidance, navigational, and control systems. So he's the GNC version for the Lunar module, whereas the GNC does the control model.
Yep.
Procedures. I'm guessing supervises the application of missile mission rules and establish techniques to conduct the flight. INCO is Integrated Communications Officer, responsible for all data, voice, and video communication systems. FAO, he is the Flight Activities Officer.
Yep.
Network is the network of ground stations that relay telemetry and communications to the spacecraft. So I believe on the Black Dog podcast you have a film called The Dish coming up.
Oh, do we?
You do. It was the Patreon suggestion, but anyway, that is a film about the satellite dish which received the first transmissions from Apollo 11, and Network would have been responsible for coordinating that stuff.
Right. Okay.
Recovery. It's not listed here, but I believe that is to do with the recovery systems if there is an abort. So that's coordinate with the US Navy and everything to get them F2, and then finally Capcom, which stands for Capsule Communications.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, Capcom was always manned by an astronaut.
Right, okay.
So what you would have is when an astronaut, was not on duty, but, they still have other duties to do when they're not in space, they would come in to man that and they would speak to it. And all communication to and from spacecraft, even to this day, is done through a station called Capcom, even to the space station. And it's always an astronaut who deals with that communication.
I can see why.
It makes a lot of sense, and again, it also means there's no one talking to someone else, but there's no risk of someone over talking or not relaying important information to someone. It's all going to one place.
Yeah, exactly, but you've also got that communication between someone who knows what they're talking about and talking to the person who's actually doing it, and you have the experience there. It's no good having someone who knows how to relay the information but doesn't know what that information actually means. Yeah,
absolutely. And the last thing I'll just mention here, this isn't something that's mentioned in the film, but in real life, there were 4 flights for Apollo, 4 teams, if you will, for the mission control. It wasn't one literally on duty for the entire thing. You had White Flight, which was manned. Gene Kranz was the flight director. You had Black Flight, which was a guy called Glyn Lunney. Gold Flight, which was manned by Jerry Griffin, and Maroon Flight from Milt Windler. And on Apollos 8, 11, and 12, there was also a Green Flight, but not on Apollo 13. Right. So we're not talking about them today. So there you go.
Just a little question about these teams that we have. We have Booster, and they are to do with the first and second stage, aren't they?
Yes.
Now, they get discarded pretty quickly in the space of things, really, don't they?
Pretty much. Basically, as soon as it's left Earth's orbit and they've done the translunar injection, they're done.
So they just pack up and go? Or do they hang around and watch and...
No, it actually says here on this wiki page I'm looking at here that after the translunar injection, after that their consoles were vacated.
Oh, okay. So they do just okay. Right. See you later, guys. Enjoy.
Yeah. Y'all have fun now.
Yeah.
Effectively, at that point, though, he might have had other duties, but he probably would no longer be involved with the mission control at that point. He would probably go back working on some other part of pre-flight for the next Apollo mission or something like that.
Yeah.
Because all these guys would have been engineers and stuff like that. So they'd have other duties outside of that.
Oh, I'm sure they don't just pack up and then go on holiday for 2 weeks.
It's a shame, because that'd be a pretty sweet job if it was.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Oh, God, yeah.
Look, I've got you off the Earth. What more do you want?
Exactly. What, you want me to get you back now? Cool.
No, that's a totally different department. It's not my job. Not my job.
So, yeah. And also, I don't know if everyone's aware of this or not, but mission control is not located in Florida where the launches are. That's launch control. Mission control is in Houston in Texas. Mm-hmm. Which is why, again, after the shout out for the go no go for launch, he then says, launch control, this is Houston, we are go for launch. And then you have the launch director. Now at the launch site, you also had a whole load of other controllers. I don't have a list of them to hand, I'm afraid. But fundamentally, they'll be the ones overseeing the pad itself, checking the weather, making sure situations on the ground. They call it the range, so making sure that there's no ships or aircraft are entering that, that could cause a hazard.
Yep.
Stuff like that. And again, they have the ability to abort the launch if there's something not right in that respect there. So basically, up until the point where the vehicle has cleared the tower, it's under the authority of launch control. After that, it goes to mission control.
Gotcha. Now, is that because you have a very small chance of the rocket hightailing it into the building that they're all in? And you need somewhere totally different away from them, so any fallout they can still deal with.
No, I believe it was a political reason. Because NASA is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and they didn't want everything to be in Florida.
Right.
So they have to do the launches from either Florida or California, because depending if you want it to go on a polar orbit or an equatorial orbit or what have you, they're the best places to do it because you get the biggest boost from the spin of the Earth, effectively.
Yes, yeah.
So you kind of had to be there. And you have to, there's things you have to be near water, you have to have safe ways to launch and all that sort of stuff. So that was fine. But then it was like, well, okay, we don't want, the best thing to do would have been to build everything there in Florida. It would have been cheaper. If you could just build the Saturn V next to the launch station, stick it up on the pad and launch it and keep it all there, it would have been a huge amount cheaper. But then there's no benefit to, other sectors around there. So parts of the Saturn V were built in like New Orleans, and then they'd be taken by barge down to Florida. Other bits were built in California. Some bits were built in the Midwest. So bits from all over the country came together to do this. I'm going to go slightly off topic here, but that's what actually caused the Challenger disaster inadvertently. The reason it has those solid rocket boosters, they were built by a company called Morton Firecool, who I believe were located somewhere Texas-y, that side of the world. And the only way to get those boosters to there was by train, but they were too big to take as a single unit, so they had to take them in sections.
Yep.
So they were put in sections so they could fit on the train to get there, and then they used the O-rings to seal the individual sections. Whereas if they were just made in Florida or somewhere which was easily accessible, they could have been made as a single unit, would have been safe.
And you wouldn't have needed the O-rings whatsoever, would you?
Yeah. So my understanding is the reason why Mission Control is in Houston, it was a political reason. It's basically, to keep, I think, LBJ at the time or whoever was in charge happy.
Yeah. They
put it in his home state. I will look it up for when we do our next episode, and I can tell you exactly then. But that was basically it. It wasn't like, there's a chance it could take out Mission Control. No, it was purely a political thing. No,
it sounds that's plausible. I totally believe you on that. It's because it is owned by it's government money, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then so they need to spread that money across the country. They can't just have Florida just benefiting from that solely. That's just not fair on the rest of the country, really, is it?
It's one of the reasons I think something like SpaceX is being able to prosper is because it's a private company and it can do everything in house, which is why they just have one. It's all done in California at their base, and they actually prefer launching from Vandenberg Air Force Base because it's closer to them.
Yeah.
But what they do actually have is in Florida now. They have leased Pad 39A, and they actually have built a little construction shed next to it so they can do the stuff there as well. So again, that makes their life a lot easier. Whereas with the SLS, the NASA rocket, that's the same thing. You've got bits being built all over the place to
appease other people higher up and shareholders as well.
Oh, well,
well, not shareholders, but yeah.
It's congressmen and representatives. Yeah. Again, people in my state are asking, why are we still funding this if we don't have to beat the Russians? Well, if you could turn around and say, well, people in your state are building this part of it, it's creating jobs for you.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's votes, man. It's votes.
Oh, yeah. All comes back to the politics. Yeah. But anyway, so that's why Mission Control is there. But yeah, we get a great scene again when they're getting into the Apollo, to the command module. Incidentally, Apollo 13 is the name of the mission, but it's not the name of the spacecraft. The spacecraft is called Odyssey.
Yes.
And the lunar module is called Aquarius. So there you go. I can tell you the Apollo 11 one was Columbia and Eagle. There you go.
With the Eagle has landed, yes.
Yes. So anyway, it's a great scene where they're being effectively kicked into their seats.
That's just one big fat foot on his shoulder, isn't it? Pulling that down. And then the seatbelt is just yanked as hard as it can.
Oh, yeah. You definitely get the impression that they're not going anywhere. It later transpires they still have some slack in there. But yeah, it's just great. That kind of like put the boot in, kick them down, and then pull that strap as tight as you can, and they got all kind of fastened up. And you get that great moment when, Lovell looks up at Gunter, shakes his hand, and he was always the last the door didn't close until Gunter was happy that everything was safe, and he would always shake the hand of a commander. I think maybe the whole crew. Yeah. And then that, he was God on that pad, and if he wasn't happy, nothing happened. And the astronauts love that; they felt a lot safer because of that. And again, you got the hatch closers and all the little latches kind of bolt around, and they're on their own. Everyone else is retired to a safe 5-mile distance.
Yeah, well, it's it's I suppose a little bit of superstition in there as well. We've always done this. We've always shook the hand. It's always him that passes us over. He says goodbye, and we've never had any problems before or since or anything like that. And so, why deviate from that? If you deviate from that, then you put worry into other people's minds.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, there's
you don't even have to be superstitious for it either.
Well, you don't have to, but I was going to say a lot of these astronauts. I think at this point, all the astronauts were ex-military and stuff like that. And again, there's a history of superstitions in the military going back to day one. Lucky socks, lucky underwear. Always get into the aircraft from a certain way.
It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, even in Formula One and stuff like that, wasn't there? People have their superstitions, and it sets their mind at ease, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, they're all fine. They're bolted in, they're seated in, and they're ready to go. And again, it's not so much the tension, but the excitement is building at this point, because you've got that soundtrack is going fantastically well with that beat building and everything, and you get this lovely, glorious, beautiful shots of the Saturn V sitting there. As the sun's just rising, you see the engines over that pit with the smoke just kind of drifting around them, and it's just like, the excitement. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually happening now, isn't it?
It's actually happening. You hear that. There's a loud noise, and it goes, fuel pumps, a few bumps, and we're hauling the mail. And you hear the voice go, "We are go for launch," and it just starts the final countdown. And as it's sticking down, and then you get the launch proper. A launch scene which was so realistic, and it still stands up beautifully well today. But Buzz Aldrin was convinced it was actual footage.
Really?
And when he was told it was not, specifically asked if NASA could use it for promotional work.
Oh man!
But it was so. I mean, and there's a lot of little details that I just want to touch upon. I love how when those F1 engines fire, and they fire one at a time in real life, but it's so quick, it seems like all of them, and you get this big fireball combusts out of the side of it. But then the force of the thrust going down there creates a vacuum which sucks it all back down, which is cool.
Is that what happens there?
Yeah.
Right.
It looks like the footage has been reversed.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. What happens is that thrust going down into the launch trench is going so quickly, it creates a vacuum which sucks all the air down into it and sucks those flames down.
Right, because I've always wanted to ask people about this, because did they dump a load of water into this as well?
I don't think they did it with the Saturn V.
They do it with the shuttle, didn't they?
Yes, but do you know why they do it with the shuttle?
Right, I think it's heat, but also sound as well, isn't it? It's to dampen the sound. It's
mostly for the sound damp. Well, it's sound and vibration resonance and stuff like that. So much to heat. But yes, they dump tons and tons of water. They do it with the Apollo. I just don't know how much they did. I don't think it was as much as with the shuttle. The shuttle, they had to do a lot more.
Yeah, well, I think that was one of the most technical pieces of kit we've ever built in our lives, isn't it? And so you just don't want it to shake itself to pieces, do you?
Yeah.
And once you hit that harmonic resonance, then if you start shaking it, maybe it is a specific harmonic resonance that it will actually break apart. And so, if they can dampen that any way whatsoever, and plus they probably got some old neighbours, knocking on their door the next day after a launch saying, do you mind not setting off your rockets?
Oh, keep it down, you damn kids.
It's a bit loud.
You can't launch rockets after 11 o'clock. It's the law.
Exactly.
I was going to say, just the other thing you've got to bear in mind is the shuttle was a lot more susceptible to damage at launch than the Saturn V. Saturn V was pretty bulletproof, to be honest.
Yeah.
Partly because it's figure quoting here, relatively simple. But the shuttle, with all those tiles, were very susceptible to damage. If you damage the tiles, it affects your re-entry. The command service module, the heat shield is well protected, basically on the top of all of that.
Yeah.
Whereas the shuttle, those vibrations could damage tiles. It would also potentially damage the foam on the external tank, which is what happened with the Columbia.
Yes.
With the Saturn V, it's not insulated, which is why you see all that ice falling down once it starts.
Yeah, that's just frozen air, really, isn't it? It's the air just sticking to it, freezing, and then once you start sending the rocket up, it just breaks away and falls down, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's filled with liquid oxygen, which is fantastically cold. That just the vibrations and everything just kind of it falls down and away, which is just an enduring shot of those launchers. What I'll dig out, and Elton, if you remember to stick this in the description for this as well, I have a link to the high-speed video footage of the Saturn V launch, and it's great to watch. It's just like hypnotic because it's super high speed. This is the stuff the engineers would use to make sure there was no problems. And you're watching this, and it's just like in the film you see how like all engines seem to fire off at once, but they staggered. It would be 1, 3, 2, 4, and then 5 to stop the thing rocking backwards and forwards too much. And you can see them all lighting individually here, and it's just great to watch. And again, just seeing all the intricate little details, like the explosive bolts detonate right before the launch. One thing that's a little bit, changed for the film, and this is a minor point, but on the launch proper, all of those service arms swung away at the same time, very quickly. Whereas in the film, it seems like they're going one by one.
Yeah, once again, dramatic license, isn't it? But it's such a beautiful shot where it kind of almost waterfalls over the top of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it works its way down, twisting as well.
It's just so good. It's going, all these things are swinging away sort of thing. And then you hear Jim Lovell say, the clock is running. And the mission clock means the mission has officially begun. And then you get the final counterweight swings, the explosive bolts go, and whee! We have cleared the tower at 1313.
But yeah, you imagine how much weight that those counterweights can hold as well. They're holding that thing there.
Because they're thrusting those engines up to full power. So that's a lot of force going through those explosive bolts there.
Yeah, man.
Cool. It is so cool. And then you see that thing go and it's launched. And then again, you get these great shots like as it's going through max Q, which is when the maximum dynamic pressure is being applied to the rocket. And you've got those supersonic cones as it's going through the atmosphere. And then you've got a great moment when he goes, stand by for a little jolt, fellas, as it does the staging. So what happens is the first stage shuts down, which is MECO, main engine cutoff. And then you get these little thrusters kind of blast that section away. And then the second stage kicks in. And you just see all three of those guys go flying forwards. And you saw how tightly they were strapped in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go flying back. And it's just a great little moment like that.
Now, funny enough, I was watching today a program called Mars on Netflix. And they had it. I'm not too sure if I like the program yet or not, but they had a section where they got twin brothers and sent one of them up to space on a Soyuz rocket, and the other one was staying down on Earth. And they're just going to see how a year in space will affect the human body. And they have onboard footage of the launch. I think it is. It's either the launch or the descent.
Okay.
And the shaking that these guys get, they're just buffeted around in these capsules. It's just unlike anything else. You'd expect them just to be in a seat, that's it, strapped in, harnesses on, as tight as they can go. You ain't going anywhere. Oh, no. You are ragdolled around in there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's proper bonkers, but well worth looking at this sort of footage and just to see how accurate these guys get it.
That's on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I will look into that. Yes, I'll check it out.
It cuts in between a dramatized story set in 2033 and real life 2016 with Elon Musk and what he's trying to do with SpaceX. So it is,
in between becoming a supervillain.
Yeah. Well, he's one stage away from getting a volcano, isn't he?
Well, he did actually say at one point if a Falcon 9 launch went okay a few years ago, he might treat himself to that hollowed out volcano.
Oh man, yeah, I trust him. Although his name is almost Elton, he just hasn't got the T.
It's true. Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but anyway, yeah.
Let us get back to our Saturn V, which is currently cruising into orbit. We have a nice little sequence here, and again, this really happened. There was an engine failure on the second stage.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Again, we have 5 engines on the second stage, slightly smaller engines. Not sure what they are. They're not F1s, but anyway, the middle engine didn't light or failed straight after it was ignited. So they report down to mission control. There's a failure on the it's a J2 engine, failure on the number 5 engine, but the other 4 are functioning correctly. What do we do? And then you have Booster say, okay, as long as we don't lose another engine, we're fine. They'll just burn the other ones a little bit longer. And yeah, everything's fine. And then you have Lovell say, I think we've had our glitch for this mission.
Yeah, of course you have.
Yeah, that's not going to bite you in the ass.
Once again, very subtly done, isn't it?
It's very subtly done. It's very nicely done. And again, it just kind of continues on its way there with no problems. Then you have the second stage shut down. And then SECO, second engine cutoff. And that's it. They're now in orbit on the S4B. And then we get to one of the things which I think makes Apollo 13 special above just about every other film, I think. I don't think any other film has done this.
Okay.
Actual weightlessness.
Yeah, this was a massive thing about when this film came out, wasn't it? You had your money shot of the Apollo 13 taking off, or the Saturn V taking off. But then you also had all the background information on, well, how did they do all this waitlist stuff?
Yeah, and apparently, so they didn't do it for every shot. It's not everything in the command module and all that is, on the Vomit Comet. But in some of them, what you had is you'd have them standing on like a milk crate, kind of awkwardly doing a floating gesture. Mm-hmm. And apparently at one point someone visited the set and they saw Tom Hanks standing on this milk crate doing that. And they just thought, oh, my God, they've got a disaster on their hands. It just looked so bad.
But I think if you treat the audience to proper weightlessness at the very beginning, then that can carry through the rest of the film because you've seen the weightlessness. They've given it to you.
Well, it was basically if you don't see the whole body and if you don't see objects, then they wouldn't do it weightless.
Yeah.
Just to save money, if nothing else. But
it costs a fortune to go on there, doesn't it?
Oh, God, yeah. But that first scene when they're taking off their helmets and their gloves and they're just floating around in there, and they're obviously delighted. I mean, I don't know if this was like the first take or what it was, but you can kind of just sense that the actors are just like, this is the coolest thing ever.
This is my job.
Yes, I am being paid to do this right now.
Oh, man. But yeah, I think if they show a floating glove in front of you, then you just naturally assume that, okay, well, they're acting. I don't need to see another floating glove to prove that it's weightlessness. And we also know that it's a very tight area in which they're compacted in. And so you're not going to have...
I'll tell you something, right? With the command module, I'm always convinced there's like a huge room behind there we just never see.
Right.
There's not. There literally is those 3 couches and that little space beneath their feet. Mm-hmm. Because I've actually, at a science museum, they have a command module. I believe it's the one from Apollo 10.
Right.
But anyway, it's tiny. But I always feel like, whenever you see him ducking down, there's like a living room or something there.
Oh, man, yeah. I'd imagine that they wish that there was there. But yeah, it's so compact. You're not going to get 2001 visuals where people are running round a massive room, are you?
Oh, no, not at all. But it's really effective when, again, like when you see them taking off those gloves or when you see them moving through the tunnel between the lunar module and the command module. That's just really, really well done.
Yeah.
And again, it just sells. I straight up forget it's a film at some points during those moments, It just feels like, well, yeah, they're in space,
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you a for instance of what I didn't like about this movie.
Okay.
There is one scene that I didn't like. It's the bit where Jim Lovell he's daydreaming about when they're going around the back of the moon, and he's daydreaming about being on the moon.
Ah, okay.
And he's passing his hands through the regolith, I think it is.
Regolith. Yes, moon dust. Yeah. But yes.
And it just, Kubrick would have done it better, I feel.
Well, you say that. I was going to highlight that as actually. I'm going to save it until I get to that bit.
Okay.
I have something to say about that sequence. I get what you're saying, but I will say that the scenes in 2001 on the moon are the only bits of 2001 from a fashion aside which give away that it's not on the moon. All the stuff in the on the Discovery and the space stuff, he gets spot on. But on the moon stuff, they walk normally. Yeah. They don't have that slight jump, that slight effectively weightlessness. Mm-hmm. Because it's 1:6, and they don't have that in 2001. They just walk around normally.
Yeah.
And that just distracts me a little bit. But that's just me.
Yeah. No, I get that.
But yeah, here we come to another one of our scenes, which is, and I promise you, we're not going blow by blow. It's just these are some sequences where there's a lot to talk about. But we've got another moment, which a bit of dramatic license goes on here, when Schweigert has to undock the lunar module from the S4B.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And again, we have this sense of fate tension of, can he do this? And you have that, come on, rookie, park that thing. And we'd already seen Mattingly do this in the simulator with no real problems.
Yeah.
So we're like, Ken Mattingly could do this with no problem. But yeah, as actual Jim Lovell pointed out in an interview, he goes, Schweigert was a fully qualified pilot, as good as anyone. But even if he couldn't, for whatever reason, Jim Lovell was a fully qualified pilot who'd flown on Apollo 8, and Fred Hayes was a fully qualified pilot. So they weren't going to cancel the mission if he couldn't do it for whatever reason. But yeah, again, it's just installing that little sense of tension there. But they get it done.
Well, the film is setting him up, isn't it? Really,
it is setting him up almost as the bad guy, I suppose.
We know that he's not the bad guy.
Yes, but
we need the other characters in the film. We're watching a film, so we need some tension there, and we know that we need the other guys to see him as a bad guy. And did you do anything wrong? Did you press the red button? Did you do this right? We need that there. Yeah,
they need that little bit of tension there. We also get a little scene of Fred Hayes throwing up, which is not the most pleasant thing of all time to see. Apparently it was chicken stock.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. Yeah, that was grim.
Yeah. But accurate as well, because, despite deliberately trying to screen for space sickness and subjecting to all tests, sometimes when, very often when they got into space, people were sick, Yeah. It's just a way of it.
Yeah, and covered consoles with the insides of their stomach.
Oh. Well, I was going to say, if you ever get a chance, and again, get into this more later on, but there's some of the transcripts from the Apollo missions. Let's just say at one point there's a turd floating around a command module.
I think, actually I'd be disappointed if there wasn't at some point. It has to happen, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, you're going to be in that close proximity with three people. You're going to get friendly with them, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's going to be no secrets by the end of that.
No, you're going to be turning around and all of a sudden you got something that you don't want in your face. So, it's three people in a confined space. You're going to get that. You're going to get a bit of rubbing every now and again.
Yeah. All of a sudden, my desire to go on Apollo missions kind of gone down a little bit. Yeah, I can't imagine why.
Stop backing into me, man. Stop backing. Why are you backing into me? I'm not. It feels good though.
Wow, it's gotten awkward all of a sudden.
Yes.
Let's steer this shit back on course. So anyway, we're on the way to the moon here. We get the transmission that we did, because I think every Apollo mission did it. Certainly up until 13. So 11 and 12. Well, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 all broadcast TV programs, because that's the thing. It's not this isn't the second time NASA's done this. The first manned mission was Apollo 7. So 7 was just to orbit, 8 was around the moon, 9 was to orbit, 10 was around the moon, and 11 was the first landing. So again, at this point, the American public's a bit blasé about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Don't really give a fuck. And again, you get the sense that, people just don't give a fuck. Don't care. You do have a nice little sequence with his mum, played by Ron Howard's mother.
Is that his mum?
That's his mum.
Oh, okay.
And again, she's in a home, and they're trying to find me. They can't find the TV show, and it's horrible. It makes her sound like a real crazy person. My son should be on. He's in outer space, and it's like, no, he actually is in outer space. She's not crazy. Don't look at her like that.
Yeah, but it's a lady talking about a person in outer space, and of course it's your son. Oh yes, of course it is, Margaret. Yeah.
So there's that. It's a fun little sequence there, and again, we see a little bit more with his family. A bit put out that his broadcast wasn't aired. You see the baseball show or something like that.
And they're trying to cover it up as well, aren't they? Don't tell the guys up there.
Well, yeah, I just don't think they wanted to kind of disappoint them. I don't think they'd have particularly cared, but that's just the nature of it. But yeah, it's kind of immediately after that we get our problem. So what happens is they ask to perform a cryo stir. So the liquid oxygen in the breathable tanks is very, very, very cold, fantastically cold, as I said. Mm. And cryostir was they had these fans in the oxygen tanks, and it would just stir the liquid oxygen, and I think just kind of energize it a little bit, stop it sticking or go solidifying, something like that.
I think more solidifying, keeping it moving.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, once it's moving, it's going to keep moving. No gravity. But it just needs a cryo stir for the tanks. So he does this, flicks the switch, does it, and we get a cool little shot in the service module following a wire to something rattling backwards and forwards that probably shouldn't be doing that. And all of a sudden you get that master alarm flashing. Shit's gone.
Yeah, you have your explosion then, don't you?
Yeah. You have a moment where they're like, there's a bit of shaking, and then there's a big explosion, and then it's, we got a problem. Say again, Houston, we have a problem. Yeah. And boom, everything is kicking off now. It's just alarm after alarm after alarm. The mission control, on their computers, Econ and all it, the displays are going mad, but they're convinced it's got to be an instrumentation failure because they can't understand how so much would be going wrong with the spacecraft at once.
Yeah, Ron Howard's brother is going bonkers about it, isn't he?
Yeah, because again, it's from their point, it's not that they doubt that, it's the fact that they're still talking. It's like if all of this had gone wrong, they'd already be dead. Yeah, so how could we be talking when all this is going wrong? And yeah, so what's happened is everything's just going to shit. And they're trying to understand, because again, they can't look outside and see what's happened. All they can do is sensations and report what the computers are telling them and what these displays are telling them. And, it's telling them that they're losing battery power and they're losing oxygen. The reason the two are connected is they use fuel cells, and the fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, break down oxygen to provide power.
Yes.
So, they need the oxygen not only to breathe, but also to power the spacecraft. So,
yeah, so you lose your oxygen, you're going to lose your power as well, aren't you?
Exactly. So what happens is, they're going through this, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and then Lovell notices out the window there's the gas venting out into space. And that's up until that point, okay, there's a problem, but, we'll work the problem. We'll figure out what's going on here and stuff, Something's not behaving itself. But at that point, that's the point when they realize their lives are in danger.
Well, yeah, when you're traveling, not that I'm speaking from experience, but when you're traveling from the Earth to the Moon, and
nice plug there, by the way.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. And you get side swipes. It's almost like they got T-boned out in space, isn't it?
Well, they even say put the catch cover in case we've been hit by a meteorite. And when he says I can't get it on, he goes, leave it. If we were hit by a meteorite, we'd been dead by now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would have passed straight through you anyway. You wouldn't have even seen that, would you?
Yeah. Yeah, that would have ruined your day.
Yeah. But then to look out the way that he does on this and look out on like the rearview mirror type thing, and you can see something venting out into space, everything, you don't want to see anything venting out. You're taking everything with you around the Moon and back to Earth. And you don't want anything like that coming out whatsoever at any stage of this. And then to see that is just, that's pure hell. That is exactly the opposite of what you're trying to obtain.
I mean, it's I can't imagine what it would have been like. I mean, again, these are trained professionals who are all former, Air Force or Navy pilots and stuff like that. So they're used to these high pressure situations and all those. And then again, just kind of methodically working through this sort of stuff. But yeah, you've got to imagine the bottom would fall out the pit of your stomach at that point.
I'd be sick. Absolutely sick.
Yeah, but again, all of a sudden, it's that much more vital that they figure out what's gone wrong here, and that's also when they mention about how this is no longer about landing on the Moon. We have to get the crew back to the Earth, and that's when they have one thing they can try, which is to close the react valves to the damaged batteries. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they go, okay, well, we close the react valves, and then, that should stop the leak. Because I think the impression there is that they're leaking through the batteries. Close off those batteries. Yeah. We should save the oxygen. They close those, but obviously the damage was to the oxygen tank itself, so that doesn't stop them. But it probably did save them still, because it meant the damaged battery. Well, the batteries were no longer drawing oxygen any quicker. It gave them a little bit of extra time there.
Yeah.
But what they had to then do is, we need to get into the lunar module to get out. It comes across like this is a last minute thing here, but it was a known procedure. They had envisioned doing this in the past. The thought, in fact, I think on Apollo 8 they trained for this. Right. The thought was the air in the command module could be contaminated, so everyone would go into the lunar module. They would then purge the air in the command module and then recycle it and then get back in. So again, it was an established procedure, but again, it's just everything's happening very quickly. They've just got to get it done.
During the film, do we actually see them when they go into the module? Do we see them close off that?
No, they don't close it off because they don't need to. It's a closed loop system, so the air can't go anywhere out. And once they shut down the command module, they're not drawing any oxygen out of it.
Right.
So what I'm saying is it doesn't hurt them in terms of where the oxygen is going. No,
I understand that because it's all interconnected. But if you're in an interconnected cylinder, then the air at one end is going to be the same as the air at the other end, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what's confusing about it.
Oh no! But once the air's in the cabin, it's not going to the batteries or anything like that.
Oh right, okay, yeah, going to the batteries, right? Gotcha.
Yeah. Because I mean, they lost all of the air out of their main tanks. The only thing that was providing air at the end for the re-entry was the emergency reserve tank, which I don't think went. Yeah, it didn't go to the batteries at all because they were using backup batteries and stuff, which is why they had to do a whole reverse flow. We'll get to that in a bit. Yeah. But they very quickly have to shut down the command module to save what power is left in those batteries. The batteries will still store power it has, but it can't make any more power.
Yeah.
And then, you've got to transfer the guidance system over to the LEM computer. You've got to get all this stuff done. It's all very, very frantic to try and get it all together. But again, they're able to do that because they've done the procedure for this already. They trained for this.
Yeah, there is so much training that goes on with this, though, isn't there? Stuff that we can't even imagine that goes on.
It's like Jim Lovell says. He goes, if I had $1 for every time they killed me in this thing, I wouldn't have to work for you.
Yeah, it's very, very true.
Yeah. You probably still want to, though. It's a kind of cool job, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. I would love to even have one go on that. I would die in a horrible flame of fire. But, surely that's the way you want to go out, isn't it?
If you got to go with a smile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've had our major incident then.
We've had our problem, yes.
So then the objective becomes, they know that they're not going to the moon now, don't they? So the objective of the mission now is to get home.
Yeah, it is to get the crew back safely. And then we get another iconic scene. It's Gene Kranz briefing the controllers.
Right.
With his blackboard. And, how do we get them from here to here? And, there's a lot of arguing. Again, it's they make it sense like, the decision was made here and then. But again, there are procedures in place. It was always going to be going around the moon.
Yeah, they're always going to be contingency plans on there. And they're NASA. They've thought of everything. And they've thought of everything that becomes stupid because they need to think of the stupid stuff to discard it so they can have all the good stuff left.
Yeah.
So they've done all this a million times before, but now it's real life and it's actually happening. And so the mission becomes to try and get them back, and they have to go through a number of procedures. Yeah, they have to. They shut everything down, don't they? Well,
so to go around the moon, that doesn't really cost them anything. They've already got the. They were already on that course anyway.
Yep.
So all they did is have to continue. So they don't have to expend any fuel or any power or anything like that. It's just going to keep going. It will spin them around the back end of the moon and bring them back, and that's fine. But after that, that's when they realise they don't have the power in the LEM to keep the computer running for everything else, which will allow them then to restart the command module, which would then allow them to get back. So then they have to shut everything down. To, as he points out, barely enough power to run a coffee maker for 9 hours.
Yeah.
They have to do all that. As you mentioned before, this is when we're going around the moon, and he has his little daydream. And for me, that's quite a moving scene, because if you think about it, his entire life, his entire career had been building to that moment to walk on the moon. Mm-hmm. And then as he's going around it, he's seeing it. He's closer than he was pretty close on Apollo 8, but kind of closer than they've ever been before. But he can't get down to it. And he knows he will never walk on the moon.
I think this was a record, probably at the time, but this was a record for the distance, the furthest away that we've ever been to from the Earth. Because they passed so high on the moon, because they weren't going to go anywhere near it. They were just using it.
Okay.
And I think it was a world record, a solar system record of distance from the Earth that anyone has ever travelled.
Oh, I could well believe it, again, because they weren't entering into a closer orbit there. But it's still, I really like that sequence when, he's daydreaming. I like seeing him in that suit with the anchor on his thing, because again, Lovell was a Navy pilot, and that was just kind of a cool little touch. And again, his suit had that, and yeah, I just feel really bad for him at that point, because yeah, he's that close to achieving that goal, and it slips through his fingers like the regolith. But when he sees the Earth, then he knows that no, I want to go home.
Yeah, for me, it's a bit cheesy. I think that's just a personal thing. It's just, you've had so many great shots. You even just before we go behind the moon, you have that shot where the LEM passes through the sunbeams going towards the moon, and you can see the shadow of the LEM just breaking up the sunbeams. I think it looks so beautiful. And then you have that where it's clearly shot on a different day, different studio, and it just feels like a studio shot. So it feels a bit clumsy to me.
Yeah, I suppose unlike the zero G stuff, they can't easily replicate the walking on the moon stuff, because obviously Stanley Kubrick destroyed his sets after he faked the moon landings.
Exactly, yeah. So they've got no records of that at all, have they?
Well, and actually, what not a lot of people realise is Kubrick was such a stickler for accuracy. He did insist that they film on location on the moon. So yeah, I take your point. I understand that. For me, I quite like the sequence, but it definitely feels that, and also Marilyn's premonition with the accident earlier on do feel a bit out of place. So I totally understand that.
Yeah. So we're around the back of the moon, and they have other problems to overcome as well, don't they? We have what's his name? Bill Paxton's character.
Fred Hayes.
Yeah, he gets sick, doesn't he?
He does seem to get sick. I mean, at first I thought he was the one coming down with the measles, but I think it's just, the cold and everything like that. It's just affecting him a bit more. Yeah. It almost looks like he's got the flu in some of those bits.
Yeah. One thing I did like about this, though, you have Ken Mattingly.
Mattingly, yes.
He's on Earth. He's been left behind, and his mates are going round there, and he's having a couple of beers. Takes his phone off the hook, and as he walks past the TV, this is when it's just being reported.
Yeah, they're just about to say, this is a breaking announcement, as he turns it off.
He turns off the TV. Oh, man, what timing. But yeah.
To be fair, they were making a joke about Schweigert on the Late Show, just as he did that. So he's probably like, oh yeah, you're rubbing it in some more.
Oh, about Herschel bars and having a girl in every stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay. So, what else do we need to hit on this? I know that he gets poorly on there. We have the air scrubbers that we have to go through as well.
Well, yeah, we've got the CO2 scrubber situation. So I mean, and that's one of those things where you think about it now, you think, the fuck, why, how, what? Like Gene Kranz says, tell me this isn't a government operation.
Yeah.
Because you have square cartridges on the command module and round ones on the Lunar module. I believe now all spacecraft, Russian and American, all use the same scrubbers.
Right.
For that very reason, So again, there's no risk of you suddenly find that can't work together. When they do that whole sequence, though, they pour out we've got to make this fit in the hole for this using only this. And they replicated it. When they sent pictures back from when they got back and showed them the pictures they'd taken, it was very close to what they'd actually made. And again, what they had, the prop they had in the film is very representative of what it looked like.
Yeah.
It just looks like it's a box with a plastic bag, a arch on it, and a hose coming out of it. It's just crazy, but.
Well, I like this because it does, once again, stipulate how idiotic the human race can be at times.
Yes.
Because throughout this film, we've had drama, and then it all becomes blasé, like the space journeys become blasé. And then all of a sudden, when shit goes wrong, people want to know about what's going on. And they invade people's lawns to get the news. And also you have these scrubbers where people just don't talk to each other, and they just design stuff around what they want, and there's no communication. And if there was a little bit of communication talking about it, then maybe things would be a bit more interconnected. You have two units that join together, so why shouldn't the stuff inside them units join together? Now, that's me speaking from a kind of engineering background, but also with hindsight on this situation. It's easy to see now, isn't it?
Oh, hindsight's always 2020. The thing to remember here is the Lunar module was made by Grumman.
Yep.
Whereas the command module was made by North American. So different companies. So for whatever reason, they
Which is fine, but surely in the construction they should have someone overseeing that. There should be someone in the middle there.
This is somewhere where NASA seems to have dropped the ball. But again, they learn. I think they definitely learned a lesson. I certainly think by the time of Apollo 14 launched, they had fixed those problems. One would hope, anyway. But we will get to Apollo 14 at a later episode.
Yep.
Oh yes. So as that, it's worth mentioning again for the sake of brevity and for the not having a cast of millions. A lot of people's contribution to what actually happened is condensed down into one or two people.
Yep. So
Ken Mattingly actually is representing what multiple people were involved in getting it. It's not just him and that engineer who figured this out. There was a team of people working to get it together and get that all sorted.
Oh, getting it below 19 amps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him on his, because it almost seems like he showed up and single-handed, I can save the day. But no, there was a whole team working on that. And likewise, it wasn't just Gene Kranz running the control room. The other teams were still doing their stuff as well. They were still on the 4-shift system. Some were sleeping in there to be on hand for when we needed to swap over and everything. But yeah, it wasn't just those individuals. But again, like I said, otherwise you've got a cast of thousands. You're not going to recognize, the people. We can't spend that time. I will just point out as an interesting side note, Gene Kranz never said failure is not an option. Right. But he liked it so much when the film came out, he used it as the title for his autobiography.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Gotta love.
when they're trying to get the lowest amount of amps possible to turn on the command module again.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like the engineer in me, but they've got fluorescent lights in there. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you just take them out? Don't have them turn on. Smash them if needs be.
Won't be able to see.
No, okay, not all of them. Just some of them.
I get what you say. I suspect, and I'm just spitballing here, a combination of you don't want glass shards floating around inside a spacecraft.
No, that's true.
Because that's going to be very bad. Secondly, there's always a chance with fluorescence and stuff like that, or there might have been the gas ones or what have you, but chance of sparks and stuff like that.
Yeah, just unscrew it, take it out. I've never been in there, so there's probably some people scratching their head going, well, no, you can't do that. You haven't got the tools to do that. They're not meant to be removable. They're not meant to be serviceable. So, they're just behind a screen. It's like, okay, that function, if you want to save a little bit of electricity, you take the bulbs out. It's easy.
For all we know, they might well have not fired up the lights for re-entry. Yes. It might have been for the purposes of a film.
Yeah,
we don't know.
That might have been the first thing that they crossed off the list.
Yeah, they said we can live without the lights. We'll use torches. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've got a big sun outside as well, so we're all right.
Yeah. So we'll put a pin in that one. It's entirely possible. You're right. One of the things we have to do on the way back as well is we have to do a course correction burn.
Yes.
Now,
okay, why is this then?
Okay, so what happens is the explosion pushed them slightly off course, and they needed more thrust, I think, to just kind of get the proper alignments for coming back. So they actually had to do several of these over the course of a mission.
Mm-hmm.
But again, for the purposes of brevity, they only showed them doing one. And I think on the previous ones, they had the computer on still. I think we only had to do it without the computer once, maybe twice.
Well, yeah, if you show this thing 2 or 3 times throughout the movie, it becomes, once again, a bit blasé, doesn't it? So
yeah. Again, this whole thing took place over 4 days. They have to do an engine burn there. And so it's a case of, aligning the spacecraft in the right direction, pointing towards the Earth and firing it. To make sure it hits the Earth's atmosphere at the correct angle, because otherwise bad things will happen. And we don't want that to happen. So they perform a burn. It's very frantic, and there's like, oh my god, lots of shouting going on, and oh, what's going to happen? Oh my god! But they make it in the end, and everything's all right.
Yeah, but it is terrifying though, isn't it? The way that it is portrayed on here. For me, that is one of the most terrifying parts of this film, because if you screw that up, that's it. You're gone. Well, and it's in your hands as well.
If you screw any bit of this up, you are gone. But yeah, it's very, very tense, and you definitely get a sense that this is so far outside of your kind of normal operating procedures, I suppose. It's thinking. I'm not a huge fan of the way they portray the Grumman engineer there. The guy who's saying, I just want you to know we've never tested the engine before. And then, when it works, goes, hey, how about that engine? Woo!
Oh, yeah, that's... Yeah.
And it's just like...
Slap my thigh, why not?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. And, Gene Kranz is there going, oh, yeah, guess you get to keep your job now.
Yeah, man, yeah. I think it's just the tension of your life is in your hands, and if you screw this up, and the way the guys are acting in there as well, where I've got it, no, that was me, that's so good.
Oh yeah, and again, it's very, very little kind of thrusts with the attitude control sensors and everything. It's one of the set pieces of a film, and again, it's just. This really happened. That's the amazing thing here. This isn't some kind of like made up stuff. This is history.
Yeah,
which is great.
It's the deft touches as well, and I totally appreciate that. It would just be very tiny manoeuvres, because all you got to do is just slightly nudge something in space, and that's it. It's on that direction now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I feel if this was a Michael Bay movie, the joystick would be massive. He'd have two hands on the joystick. It'd be waggling all over the place. And that's all right. Barrel rolling everywhere.
It'd be flying along at sunset with an American flag in the background.
Exactly, yeah. But no, this is all very microscopic movements, isn't it? And yet you get that tension. You get the same tension from Paxton and Bacon and Hanks. They portray it so well in this.
Oh, they really do. I mean, and they do really sell just how miserable it must have been there. Because again, the heaters are all turned off and everything, and it's just everything's iced up and it's just cold and it's miserable. And they don't have blankets or anything like that. It's just kind of standing around with their arms folded, trying to keep warm in these lightweight NASA garments.
Did we ever find how cold it did actually get in there?
It got cold enough to freeze a sausage.
Yeah.
People might be asking, why didn't they put their spacesuits on? Because the spacesuits are not good insulators, apparently, and they're rubbery, apparently. They considered it, and they just dismissed it, saying, no, we'd have been worse off with those on.
Right.
So, we've just done the burn, haven't we? I think it's worth mentioning, and again, it's very hard to kind of just pick out specific scenes, but again, throughout all of this, we're getting glimpses back at home with Marilyn and her family and stuff.
I'm glad you're bringing this up now, yeah.
Because, I mean, you mentioned earlier, about them on the lawn. I love the line she gives at that point when she goes, why is the press didn't give a damn when my husband was going to land on the moon. Why should they care when he's not going to?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just great. And again, there's a resilience there. I mean, this entire cast is just so amazing.
Yeah.
But I just love the strength she brings to it. I mean, the only moment where she really kind of gives into despair is when they're going around the dark side of the moon. And she's got that little radio which lets her listen to the feed coming from NASA, and it goes to static.
Yeah.
And she just kind of breaks down and just cries at that moment. And it's like that's the only time she allowed herself to feel alone, almost. But you feel the connection between her and Jim throughout this. And it's just so well portrayed. You always worry about a film like this, about it getting. You need the personal connection. You need the interplay between the people, but you don't want to go too far where it's too soppy, too overplayed, and you don't want it to go too far the other way where it's too cold and technical. And
that's right. Yeah, it could have been just robots acting out in the command module, really, because it would be very clinical up there, wouldn't it?
It was, and again, you can listen to the actual. You can listen to the actual. Recordings from NASA of the actual stuff, and it is very clinical because again, these guys are professionals. They're working in their office and they have to put. I mean, there's that bit where they're shouting and NASA goes, "You're on Vox. We can all hear you." I'm telling NASA I'm well aware of a goddamn gimbal. None of that ever happened. It was always very calm and professional, very collected. Again, at this point, Jim Lovell was the most experienced astronaut there was. Had more time in space than anyone else. But, again, that doesn't make for good filmmaking, a good story there. But I really like the connection that those two had. It feels very authentic, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And, they hardly interact as well, do they? It's at the very beginning. It's just at the very beginning that they interact with each other, isn't it?
Yeah, because again, the film ends, with him on the ship, before he gets back. But it's just she always feels like she's part of it. When we get to the Apollo 13 episode of the series, what they did differently is it's entirely from the point of view of the ground.
Right.
So again, you get a lot more of that story in the series proper. But again, I just thought it's definitely worth mentioning here. It just what a powerful performance she gives throughout this, which is.
There's a nice line that I liked when I think she was talking to some reporters and she's like, no, well, you can bring it up with my husband. He'll be home on Friday.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, man, that is it.
Yeah, you do. This woman will not take any of your shit.
Yeah, but also you got Jim Lovell's mother.
Yes.
And there's a moment where his wife brings in 2 astronauts.
Yeah, 2 particular astronauts, yeah.
Yeah, and okay. Do you know my son? Oh, yeah, we've heard of him. And it turns out to be Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, doesn't it?
Well, so what happens is Marilyn brings them in and says, look, can you just, when the news starts giving the heavy, as they always do, the projections about how they're going to die and all that sort of stuff, being really thing, if you could just help distract her, keep her mind off it a little bit. And introducing goes, Blanche, this is Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And then she just turns to him and goes, are you boys in the space program too? And it's like, at this point, Neil Armstrong is the single most famous man on the planet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. And again, I like that little touch there, though. And because, again, this is true. The astronaut corps are a very tight-knit group, a very close family, as we will see through the rest of the series. But, this actually happened. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went to his house.
Yeah.
And he was there with them. So I think that's just a really good little detail, which, I think a lesser director would probably have left out.
It's all hands on deck, isn't it? That's what it is. It's the whole family getting back together and helping each other out. But there is another scene later on where I think Neil Armstrong's pouring some juice for Lovell's mother.
Yeah.
And I just had thoughts of Buzz Aldrin having a fight in the background, and because he's notoriously a bit quick with his temper, isn't he?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, in a Naked Gun version of this, they'll be having fisticuffs in the background, wouldn't they?
As you do.
But yeah, it is all good. I love it.
Yeah. Again, you got Ron Howard's father's in those scenes as well. He plays the priest who's comforting the family in the recovery thing as well.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it gets the whole family in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're kind of building up now for the final big set piece, which is re-entry. I think we've pretty much ticked off most of what we have to do there. They do figure out the procedures to power up the command module using 20 amps or whatever it is. And what's interesting as well, then you got Ken Manley gets back there, and he kind of hooks in, and they say, "Oh, hey Ken, the flowers blooming in Houston?" And he goes, "No, Jim, I don't have the measles." And you got the surgeon, and he just looks like, "Oh man, I'm just, yeah."
Yeah, well, he kind of missed the flight that it could have all gone wrong on, didn't he? That's the only saving grace of that, I suppose. It might have all gone differently.
There, but for the grace of God, go we.
Yeah, exactly.
Interestingly enough, though, Manley did make it to the moon in the end.
Yeah.
He was the command module pilot on Apollo 17.
The last one.
Was it 17? It was 16. I'm sorry, I tell a lie. But yes, he did make it there. He also flew the space shuttle.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, he made it in the end. But yeah, so we're kind of gearing up for the re-entry. Schweigert kind of comes back into his own as well here, because he was a command module pilot without a command module for a while.
Yeah.
But they have the powering up the Odyssey bits. He gets to be useful. You see them moving stuff up into the command module because they got to bring some stuff with them. That's
right. They were expecting to bring back a couple of kilos or pounds worth of lunar rock, weren't they?
Yes, moon rocks.
Yeah, which I love that. I don't know what it is about it, but they calculate for every single nut and bolt, and they're like, well, why are we off? Why are we off? Oh yeah, we didn't pick up any rocks.
I still don't understand though. Okay, they were shallowing at that point.
Yeah.
And when they transfer over the stuff to the Odyssey, there'd be more weight there, but it's not like they magicked up more weight that wasn't already part of a spacecraft. So
yeah, well, that burn was supposed to get them out of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, they were still coming in a bit shallower, but yeah, They figured it out.
Yeah, because just transferring weight from one side of the tube to the other side of the tube does not give you more weight, does it?
No. I mean, it would have given them more weight. There'd be more weight in the Odyssey than there would have been otherwise once they've detached the lunar module. But at that point, it won't have given them any more. But still, I suppose it was a good way to convey to the audience that they had to do this.
Yeah.
It also sets up that they're coming in shallow for the end bit of the film, which I think is important as well. We get the bit when they detach the service module, and we get the first look of the actual damage.
That looks incredible.
It is. Have you actually seen the pictures of it, the proper ones?
No, I probably have, but I haven't recently, no. But what they do there, it just looks incredible, because then you've got the worry, not only that they've been through all this crap, that they've done the scrubbers and they've had the electrical problems and the oxygen problems, but then you've also got the worry about the heat shield after that as well. Yeah,
it could be all for nothing if the heat shield is screwed. I've just sent you a picture of the service module there.
Oh, okay. So
you can have a look. And I gotta say, that's not a sight you want to see from your spacecraft.
Oh, man. Look at that.
Yeah. These are all on Wikipedia and Google. If you just search for the Apollo 13 service module, you can see it. But yeah, like it's an entire panel on the service module's blown out. It damaged the high gain antenna.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can see the oxygen bottles in there.
Mm. That looks incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's pretty faithful as well in the movie as well, isn't it? Yeah, it's rolling a bit more, but
it's very faithful. And that's the whole thing about this film. It's so faithful to the details and the facts. And that's what I love about it.
Well, I think if you're going to do this, then what's the point if you're not going to be faithful?
Well,
as faithful as you can be.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, we can get into a whole debate about. I mean, I think that's the Shonky Lab episode at some point. Put it on the list. I will happily come and rant with you about those films at that point.
Yeah, I wonder how long that lasted in orbit. It probably burned up the next day, didn't it?
Possibly the next
day. They're heading towards the Earth anyway, aren't they? So
yeah, it wouldn't have lasted long. Yeah, both the service module and the lunar module did burn up. They did track the lunar module because it was carrying an RTG, a radio isotope thermal generator. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's little pellets of nuclear fuel, which, as they decay, give off heat, which powers systems.
Yep.
Normally meant to be left on the moon. This one came back. So they did track where it landed just to make sure it wasn't going to land on any populated areas, and they could keep track of it.
Yeah.
Again, little sidebar, but I learned something interesting last week. There's a place in the Pacific Ocean called Point Nemo.
Okay.
It is a spacecraft graveyard because it is a point that it's the most remote point away from all land and everything. So that's where they try and deorbit stuff, satellites, the Mir, anything like that. So yeah, it's a spacecraft graveyard called Point.
There you go.
So I do believe they tried to get the Aquarius and the service module to land there.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Have anyone ever dive down there?
No, partly because it's really deep and really inaccessible and just really horrible, and partly because not a huge amount of this stuff will survive. Again, with the lunar module, parts of it were no thicker than some aluminum foil.
Oh yeah, I'd imagine that most of that would be left up in the atmosphere and just spread around, wouldn't it?
They did recently find some F1 engines from a Stage 1, though. Old Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, as billionaires are prone to do these days, decided to go off and get stuff.
Well, you're a billionaire. What else are you going to do with your time?
Yeah, pretty much. Or your money.
Yeah. It's like James Cameron. He got bored, so he went and visited the Titanic 1 million times, didn't he?
Yeah. So anyway, they've done that. they're all back in the command module at this point, back in the Odyssey, and we've got to say goodbye to the Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a sad little moment, and as it drifts away, you hear Hayes go, "She sure was a good ship. And farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you." It's just. I mean, you know me. I've got a thing for spaceships, and yeah, it was a good ship, and it's just sad to say goodbye.
Oh yeah, of course it is. It's like saying goodbye to a faithful car, isn't it? Or that shit car that you have that keeps breaking down, but
it's that shit car which keeps breaking down, but kept you alive for the better part of a week.
Yeah, but it brought your children back from the hospital, so do you know what? You love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, yeah, okay, I understand why this is important.
Yeah.
So yeah. Again, Bova's still concerned because they're coming in shallow, and they're still concerned because there's damage to the heat shield.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're coming.
We enter the Earth's atmosphere then.
And I love that effect. It is, I think, to this date, the most authentic recreation, because no one's really seen a spacecraft re-enter from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it hits, the heat starts building with the friction, and you get the fire and the flames and everything. And it's like, I love this detail. And this is a detail which only comes out of a book from Jim Lovell. It rained inside the module because all of the water that was in there, all the moisture had frozen. And as they're falling down and it heats up, it just starts to rain on top of them.
Yeah. That must be so weird.
Well, it must be weird, and it must be really kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah. You don't want all that going into the circuits, do you? Because that's the last thing you want at that point.
Well, yeah.
I'm sure they're not going to do much more at that point. They've got another 6 minutes worth. Please just get us down. They made it to the moon, all the way around the moon and back, and then they're worried about the last 6 minutes.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, and it's not just the heat shield which could go wrong; it's the parachutes as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone's just kind of on the edge of their seats. They're just waiting for this bit to come in, and again, it's a great little moment. And then again, we get a little bit of a tease here, where they keep saying no re-entry's ever taken more than 3 minutes. They say re-entry takes 3 minutes. If they're not back in 4 minutes, we'll know. And it's just all that kind of build up and that suggestion and stuff.
Is this TV bullshit?
No, it's not TV bullshit in so much as they were coming in shallow and it did take them longer. The TV bullshit bit, though, is they picked them up on radar before they had communications.
Mm-hmm.
So they did know that the Odyssey had survived re-entry.
Yep.
But, it took them a minute for them to re-establish communication. But then again, there have been instances where there was a Soviet instance where the spacecraft survived, but the crew had died. Yeah.
It crashed, didn't it? Kind of hit the ground a bit too hard, didn't it?
Well, it didn't hit the ground too hard. There was a pressurization problem, I think it was. And, it just kind of... the crew just died, basically. Well, I don't know the details.
Yeah. It's this thing of they want visual contact on it. Yeah, you still got it on radar. Yeah, well, anyone can track a tracker falling through the sky. But you want visual contact. You want to see the parachutes open. Because there was a scene earlier on where they're trying to work out the ampage. And they're turning around and say, well, you need to weigh up these things. Do you want to warm up the chutes before they open up or not? Because they've been cold all this time. Well, okay, well, if you want to trade the chutes off, then what's the point in all this? Let you just crash into the ground.
Yeah. That's not a pleasant thought, really, is it?
No, exactly, yeah. So,
I mean, one of the things the film did very well is it did explain the risks in a good sense before kind of showing the risks. So, they had the news report explaining about the heat shield. You had Mattingly explain that, the parachutes have been frozen, 3 blocks of ice, and what's the point and all that. And it does a very good job of, without talking down to you at all, saying this has to happen and then this has to happen and then this has to happen, or, bad things will happen.
Yeah.
So the audience is fully informed about what the risks and the dangers are before they happen. But yeah, it comes through, and you got Ken Mattingly keeps saying, come in Apollo 13, come in Apollo 13. This is mission control and all that. And then just as the radio crackles in, and we see the picture appear on the screen. It's like, yay, they made it! And then everyone, it's like, and release. It's like, ah.
And his son gets mobbed at school as well, doesn't he?
His son gets mobbed at his military academy there. Yeah. What's really nice is Ed Harris, playing Gene Kranz. He just kind of sits down and just kind of holds the bridge of his nose. And that came from an interview where Gene Kranz was talking about it and was still getting emotional. And he decided to use that in his performance. And I think that's a really nice bit. It's like he's kept it together this long, and it's only now he's like, oh, thank fuck, that's over with.
Yeah.
Which is great. You got, Marilyn and the rest of the family, leaping out of her skin. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a shame I didn't see, Blanche and Neil and Buzz, to be honest.
They were there. There was a very brief scene. I think it was just before his son was on the screen. But yeah, they were there as well. But I don't think it was like high-fiving and giving Blanche the bumps or anything like that.
Yeah.
Although that would have been...
yeah, it would have been interesting.
Throwing her up in the air.
Yeah. Took a very dark turn all of a sudden.
Yeah, once again, it always does, mate. It always does.
It does. But yeah, that was a very nice moment. We see the craft land again, done for the film. This wasn't archive footage or anything like that. The parachute deploying and it falling down and landing. That was a mixture of models and then a full size mock up they use for the bit when he's getting out of it.
Yep.
Which you can still see. The Navy very kindly loaned them a ship and a couple of helicopters to.
I think the Navy would, with Lovell and his attachment with the Navy as well.
Well, absolutely, and again, it paints them all in a very positive light, which is kind of
does, yeah.
And again, there's a great bit when they get on to the craft. You actually see Jim Lovell's there.
Isn't he the guy that welcomes them home?
Well, you see while Tom Hanks is giving the narration about the successful failure, and there's a captain who he shakes hand and salutes, and that's Jim Lovell.
Ah,
he was told he was offered the chance to be the admiral, and he said, no, I retired a captain, so I'll be a captain. And he wore his old uniform, which still fit.
Oh, nice. You see, nice little touches like that as well. That's so cool. I'm actually watching that scene right now.
Again, it's a feel good film, and a lot of it comes about because of that last scene. It's built up attention beautifully. It's kind of ridden that way between being too tense and not tense enough really well, and then you get that final bit where it's just like, yes, there's the release, and everyone's cheering and the music swells, and they land. They get that bit when he goes, mission control. This is Apollo 13. Capsule is secure at Stable 1. This is Apollo 13 signing off.
Yeah,
and he goes to help Fred out of the seat, but he's okay, and then you get Schweiger and him shake hands because they've come to mutually respect each other.
Yeah, no, I'm just watching that scene again and again now.
It's just so good. Incidentally, when he says for capsules at Stable 1, what he means is when the capsule landed in the ocean, there were two states it could be in. Stable 1 is it stands upright, like that. Stable 2 would be if it landed upside down. It could still float upside down. It was supposed to have these three inflatable balls which would right it, but if it didn't, they would declare it's at Stable 2. And at Stable 2, they would remain in the craft until they could hoist it aboard the ship and get them out that way.
Right, okay.
See? Cool. There you go. You learned something there.
Yeah. No, it has that feel-good factor on it, but it's not hoorah, we're America type thing and all the flags are waving all over the place. It hasn't got that cliche thing about it, has it?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. There's Lovell.
Yeah, you see him now.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, it hasn't got the flag draped all over it, a bit like some other movies that we could mention. But we won't.
Michael Bay one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice. I like the narration at the end as well, where he explains, what happened. It was a problem a manufacturing defect that occurred months before he was even named as the commander.
I think that's the only way you could finish this film, with narration as to what happened to the crew, because you don't really want 4 days later. You don't need that, do you?
No, I think it ends at just the right point there. And again, as he says, it's his final mission into space. It does a little bit of that whole kind of, Ken Mattingly flew into space on Apollo 16 and flew the space shuttle. Schweigert was elected to Congress but died before he could take office, and all that sort of stuff. Was bit. And then he goes, I often find myself looking back at the moon and wondering, when will we go back? And it's like, yes, when will we go back? Damn it!
And he's still there, looking up at the moon, going, when will we be going back? I don't know. Yeah. But Obama wanted us to go further out into space, didn't he? Well, his Congress did, but I don't know if anything's going to happen with that.
It'll be Elon Musk who will end up, or someone like him. It'll be private industry, but yeah, we will see. Yeah. But yes, there you go. That is Apollo 13.
Nice long one as well. That's what she said.
Euphemism.
Sorry, man. It happens every single recording.
It's a Saturn V's worth of podcast there for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Almost as long as the film itself.
Actually, you're right. It's now actually longer than the film.
No, that was awesome. I'm looking forward to doing. There's 10 episodes of From the Earth to the Moon, isn't there?
Yeah, there's 10 episodes. Again, without getting ahead of ourselves, I'll just very briefly bring it up on internet.
And they're short. They're 40 minutes, 45 minutes each?
Yeah, they're about 40 odd minutes each. Named for the book by Jules Verne. Mm-hmm. It says the running time's 60 minutes, but I think that was 60 minutes with adverts. But yeah, I don't think that long. But yeah, basically it starts off with, the beginnings of the space race. There's a little bit of background information there. Then we go through Apollo 1, Apollo 7, Apollo 8. It basically goes through each Apollo mission, each manned Apollo mission has an episode. And then I think in the final episode, it also kind of does flashbacks to Jules Verne. Not Jules Verne, sorry. It's the Jules Méliès doing the film From the Earth to the Moon. Right. And it's nicely just kind of juxtaposed there. Tom Hanks is in that last episode as well, which is kind of cool.
He's in every episode, though, isn't he? Because he does the narration at the very beginning.
Yes, he does a little walk and talk narration at the beginning. So there you go. I mean, what is a little bit disconcerting is they have different actors to Apollo 13 playing characters we've just seen.
That's going to happen, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, it's going to happen. But it is still a little bit. You don't look like the guy, even though that guy doesn't look like the guy anyway, because it was someone else. In my little mind, it's like, no, it does not make sense.
Yeah, you're kind of wrong. And there are some very good episodes in this as well. So I'm looking forward to doing all this.
It's a very good series on the whole. I will say this: unlike Band of Brothers, we're not just following the same group of characters throughout. So you never really get a chance to connect in the same way as you did in Band of Brothers. Equally so, I think, and it just turned to the nature of what the mission or the story is. Some of them are a lot stronger than others, but I think we found the same with Band of Brothers when we did that too. Yeah, there were great episodes. This isn't such a good one, but that's just the way of it. But no, I'm really looking forward to it as well. I love space. I love the Apollo missions, and I think it's just going to be really good. This is a really good series. It's I don't think it's airing anywhere. It's on DVD. You can go and get it on there.
Yep.
It might be on YouTube.
Might be on HBO as well.
Yeah, we'll have a look. We are going to have a Facebook group set up for this. So once that's all done, we'll let you know. But it'll be something like From the Earth to the Moon podcast, or whatever we end up calling this thing. If you just go to the Rogue 2 group, though, page, Rogue 2 page, you'll have links to everything on there.
Okay.
So yeah, you can figure it out from there. But yeah, I mean, any closing thoughts on Apollo 13, sir?
Any closing thoughts? I think it's a fantastic movie. I think it's beautifully shot. I think there are some stunning set pieces. I think the money shots are amazing with the Saturn V clearing the tower, etc. And I think it's just triumphant. I think it's really well done. It's paced really nicely, and the crew and the cast just top notch. I think they've made a film that will be hard to reproduce in future years without turning its mind back to this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's near as makes no difference. One of those perfect movies. That's not to say there's not problems with it. There's not things that could be done differently, but it's just everything comes together so well.
Yeah,
everything complements everything else there. It's just one of those films where I can stick it on at any time. If I catch it online anywhere, I'll just sit and watch it.
Yeah,
it's
been years since I've seen it. I'd say well over 10 years since I've seen this, and it still felt fresh to me. It is a chicken soup for the soul kind of movie, but
it'll make you feel good at the end of it. It's one of those where you think, yes, we can achieve anything, you know?
But I just didn't realise it was one of them movies for me until this viewing. I'd seen it a few times, but yeah, there's been at least a decade since I've seen it.
Wow.
At least I haven't seen it in this house, so I've been living here 11 years. So yeah, maybe 12, 13 years since I've seen this.
Do you think leave it that long before you watch it again, or is this going to?
No, I'm going to watch. Maybe not this year now, but
yeah,
I'm going to make sure I revisit it in the future. Definitely.
Awesome. There you go, then. Well, there you go, folks. There's our little trip around the moon and back with Apollo 13. So I don't know when the next one will be out yet. We haven't decided. We haven't figured that out yet. But sometime soon, there will be another trip around the moon, which you can join us on.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you got some stuff to plug? Of course you do. So get your plugging done, mate, sir.
Okay, well then, if you pop along to rogue2media.com, you can find all the shows that we produce over there. We do have the Band of Brothers podcast, which is all complete now. You can pop along to iTunes and all your favourite podcast places to download each and every one of them episodes. Also have Shonky Lab over there. Grand Prix Podcast will be coming back very soon in maybe end of February, start of March.
About a month to go, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also catch me on the Black Dog Podcast as well, which is at blackdogpodcast.com, where we review movies each and every week. And there's over 300 episodes of that, so please pop along there, give it reviews on wherever you can, and just sign up and enjoy.
Absolutely. And you can catch me, as Elton said, mostly over at Rogue 2 with a Band of Brothers podcast and a Grand Prix podcast. And coming very soon, I'm going to announce it here, the Derelict podcast. It might be called the Great Derelict podcast. I haven't finalised the name. But yes, it used to be called Space Dock Jury.
Yep.
But now it's called that. And it's basically none of the arguing over scores and stuff like that. It's just the random geekiness about whatever. I mean, this
proper
week
nerding out.
We're going to full nerd on this thing. You better believe it.
You're going to have to do the episode on the maps as well. I've seen your maps that have been.
I was literally about to say this week we've been looking at space maps. So there will be a space maps episode at some. Space maps.
What the hell?
I know, it's awesome. Lee's gonna hate that. He's not a fan of fantasy novels with maps. I don't think he's gonna like science fiction ones with them anymore. But yeah,
when I saw you posting them maps, I wanted to put a little GIF at the bottom of Homer. You know when that guy walks past and he goes, "Nerds."
Why didn't you?
I will do next time.
There you go. Yeah, boy. But yeah, as well as the stuff we used to talk about spaceship stuff, it's got a much wider remit. So we're going to also talk about things like, actual space hardware like NASA stuff. It might even do an episode on Sequest DSV. Do you know why? Because I can. That's awesome. So there you go. So that's coming back real soon. You can also catch me on Twitter at Andy3E, where I just mostly post gifs from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and squee about Star Trek Discovery. So,
excellent.
Yeah. Hey.
Cool.
So there you go. Well, I thank you for joining me, sir.
No, you are more than welcome.
Yes, and I look forward to the next one.
On to the next one.
Yes. Until then, I should go.
Oh, you're doing that, are you?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Oh, nice.